You see, I'm not one to beat around the large black boots, but the first requirement of any security guard is to be totally insecure. I mean, who else needs to dress like a riot control cop just so we can write down your name and tell you where to park your car? I'm Eddie Webb,
And I'm Chris Spivey.
and today we're going to talk about Max Headroom here on Genreless. Hello and welcome to another episode of Genres where I prove that I have really bad taste in media.
I have never seen this show before in my entire life.
Funny, I that's amazing because I loved this show. Like, the fact that you've not seen the show doesn't surprise me because it aired on CBS for like 6 weeks, had a short break, aired for another 6 weeks. No, sorry, another 4 weeks. They got canceled and was never rerun. So this did not last long, but I managed to catch it when it was first coming out and recorded a bunch of episodes. So I rewatched those tapes a ton. I have chunks of the show burned in my memory because I happened to be watching it at that moment in 1987.
I remembered, though, that you did like this show because when we were covering The Flash and Amanda Pays showed up, you
Yep.
made a comment about this show specifically regarding
Yes.
Amanda Pays.
Yes. This
Eddie is
show
smiling, by the way. His entire face is one big
I love
childish
Amanda
grin,
Pays.
which is disconcerting. He makes a Joker
Well,
smile look like a frown.
we talked about the Crush Corner. Amanda Pays was certainly in mine, and this was a show that also convinced me that Matt Frewer was a good actor. So good with the bad.
So you say a good actor.
I didn't. I said convinced me. I didn't say it was true.
All right. I think part of it is sometimes you find a vehicle like a TV show or a movie or a character that is just your personality and it makes everyone think you are a phenomenal actor. And I think that this Max Headroom show is a perfect vehicle for Matt Frewer, is why it works. Much how Tony Stark is a great character for Robert Downey Jr.
Right? No, totally. Matt Frewer is like the U.S. Tom Baker in this regard. He plays himself in slightly different intensities, and that's pretty much what he does. And he's really good at doing that. you know. But
I will
when you're a
always remember
kid and
Matt
it's the first
Frewer.
time you see this guy, you're like, "Oh my god, this guy's amazing." He's not.
I will always remember him from the Fox Generation X movie for all time. That is a Matt Frewer I know, Eddie Webb,
Yes, where
as the
he
villain.
also plays a really great Matt Frewer.
Ooh, we may have to cover that movie. That was so
Right.
bad. If we watched that
But
movie, I feel like you would have paid me back for us watching Batman Returns.
maybe, because I had not seen the Generation X movie, even though I love the
Oh my
comic.
god. Oh my god. All right, I'm storing that away for later.
I've
Back
just seen
to
clips
this
with Matt Frewer in it. So
back to this uplifting film, this uplifting series that you wanted us to watch. This was not on my list. I totally cut it off. I was like, I
yep,
hate Matt Fuhrer. I'm just going to drop without telling Eddie.
sure.
And he's like, what about Max Headroom?
We should actually talk about Max Headroom as a cultural phenomenon because he is so linked with the zeitgeist of the 80s, and yet it's kind of wild what happened here. First of all, before you went into all that, do you remember Max Headroom at all? I mean, obviously you didn't see a show, but like other than that, do you remember Max Headroom at all from the 80s?
Of course, it was a corporate mandated move to try to be cool to get you to buy shit.
Right. Yes, he was a mascot for Coca-Cola primarily. But he actually
Bad Coke
started.
before they stopped actually having Coke in the Coke.
Right. Yeah. Actually, I
History
think he
joke
was
for
pushing.
folks.
He was pushing. Also, was pushing the new wave. Yes, Coke, whatever it's called. The rebranding that went terribly.
I think it was
New
just like
Coke.
New Coke, right?
New Coke. Yeah. He tried to push New Coke. What's interesting is that he's so because Matt Frewer. and because he had an American show, and because he had the American ad campaign, most people don't realize that Max Headroom is actually a British invention. Um, he was originally created as uh, basically a VJ for Channel 4. They started doing music videos and they wanted a character to kind of talk between the videos. And because it was 1985, they had to do something that looked cool and hip and digital. But, the technology did not exist to actually do anything like that. So instead, they put a guy in a rubber mask and put him on there. So Matt Frewer played the character of Max Headroom, and they shot it and edited it in a way so it looked like he was digital.
But wait, Eddie. Did they travel to the US to recruit Matt Fuhrer? Was Matt Fuhrer their first choice of people to play Max Headroom?
Uh, my understanding was that he, even though he's American, he was actually living in the UK at the time, and so um, actually, let's take a step back. This is an interesting moment because around 85, a lot of American media's always been exported to the UK and vice versa, but in the 80s, it became really big, particularly with things like cartoons like G.I. Joe, Transformers, so on and so forth. The Disney cartoons, they were coming in strange kind of fits and starts, but they're proving to be very, very popular. So things that were American were seen as cool in that time period in the UK. So
Ah,
part of
I
the reason
wonder
why he
what
was
that's.
chosen was because he had an American accent.
I wonder what that's like now to be American and be considered cool, or to be American and be considered a good guy. I wonder what that's
Yeah, I
like.
know. But back when America was actually against Russia, and things
And
like that.
punch
Anyway,
Nazis.
yes. Um, so that and then he eventually evolved into being kind of a talk show host. Uh, and it's the kind of talk show that is probably better known now for something like Space Ghost Coast to Coast, where they'd actually record the interview, someone live recording them, and then they would afterwards slice that interview up, record Max saying something funny, and then edit in the answers from the originally previously recorded interview.
You
Um,
keep saying this space ghost coast to coast like we're supposed to know what it is. Space Ghost, from my
oh,
understanding, Eddie, was just a guy that hung out with kids and a space monkey.
fair enough. Oh yeah, you're right. No, yeah, he did have Blip. I forgot about that. Okay, so yes, we'll take a step sideways. Space Ghost Coast to Coast was a show in 1984, the one of the first, I think it was the first Cartoon Network original series, because Cartoon Network had grown enough that their recycled content was no longer growing the station, and so they wanted to start doing original content to keep growing the station, but they didn't have enough money. This Cartoon Network was, according to some interviews I've seen, basically like 3 offices and a broom closet. So it wasn't much of a part of CNN. So they said, "Can we use this existing cartoon footage that we have rights to and recut it to do something new?" So they took one of the shows, Hanna-Barbera's Space Ghost, and used that as a basis for what ended up being a talk show. So they would take the original cells from the original cartoon, redub new voices over top of them, pre-record people in a black room, put their face onto a screen, and then record new lines to go with the existing answers for the interview. And then the show starts getting steadily weirder and more surreal after that. So again, it's a talk show, but it is in no way, shape, or form live. Space Ghost's conceit was that they're all incompetent at their jobs, and so basically the guests were only rarely the butt of the joke. More often, Space Ghost and his cronies, like Zorak, the evil bug monster, was actually the head of the band. Moltar, which is the evil lava monster, was the control guy. And they're all bad at their job. That's the joke, is that they're all terrible at putting on a talk show, and the talk show is 11 minutes long. The conceit of Max Headroom was that he's actually a computer program and therefore has an outside perspective to the world, and therefore could comment on it while also being funny. Now, for
Hmm.
some reason, Channel 4 decided they need to have an origin story for Max Headroom because people were asking questions about Max Headroom. So they made a 90-minute film called Max Headroom 20 Minutes into the Future, and it did really well. CBS saw that film and said, "We want to make a show based off of that movie."
You said it's
Now,
90
what?
minutes. Why did I think it was an hour for some reason? And it was barely a movie. It was almost like a pilot for a show.
Um, well, part of the reason is because Blipverts, which is the first episode we're going to watch, is largely a shot-for-shot remake of that, but they cut 2 entire subplots to bring it down to a 45-minute thing. And you're
Okay.
right. I mean, I think it was 90 minutes with commercials, so maybe closer to like 70 minutes in actual length. It's been a
Okay.
while since I've seen it. Um, because it was a made-for-TV movie, absolutely, and it was specifically made to promote this Channel 4 show. Um, I'm going to jump ahead briefly. We talked about the Coca-Cola campaign. Max becomes hugely popular as a mascot. Coca-Cola hires him, quote unquote, as their official mascot. After that, he actually gets a Cinemax show, which is very similar to the Channel 4 show, although I believe that was actually recorded live. So Matt Frewer was in the mask rec- recording them. They did a little bit of editing post just to kind of give him his glitchiness, but otherwise, it was more or less a live show. It wasn't actually edited together, like I said before. What's fascinating about all of that is that Max Headroom, again, an icon of the 80s. I think Ready Player One movie references Max Headroom. Like, so it's like not icon in he's a good person. Icon as in a thing that people mention. Go, oh, I know that it's from the 80s. That's what I mean by icon here. All of this takes place in a court from Channel One show to the Cinemax show is the last show to get canceled, and the Coke campaign is over. Is about 2.5 years. That's it. It is a flash in the pan. This he became extremely popular and extremely not popular in very short order.
Wasn't there
Um,
talk of doing another series in 2018 or 2020 something, I thought?
yes, there were talks for a reboot at one point, which would have had Matt Frewer involved. Although I believe the intent was to have him just do voice work as opposed to the prosthetic work. And it just didn't go anywhere because, to be honest, this is not a concept that makes much sense in modern day. It is a concept that really only makes sense in exactly this time period.
All right. Why would it make sense in today's modern society where corporations are taking over the world? Is it too
Be-
close to reality and people are concerned about that?
Actually, let me reframe that slightly. I'm talking about Max Headroom, the character, not the show. The show, I do believe, could actually be updated and modernized, although there are problems with that, which I'll get to in a second. Max Headroom, the character, doesn't make sense for originally one reason. Now there's a second reason. The second reason is that people's perception of AI has radically shifted in the past 2 years, and so a fun, lovable AI is not a character that's going to go down easily after we've had 2 years of being told how AI is fucking terrible. So there's that. But the other piece is Max Headroom came at a time where people were excited by the prospects of what computers could do for media and were not worn down by the mundanity of the reality of that practice.
Uh,
In 85, CGI as a concept was something that a couple of movies had started to flirt with, but no one had really invested fully in. So Max Headroom was really a concept piece of this is what computer generated actors could look like. And people were excited by that prospect. And then by 87, CGI actually starts getting used, and people go, "Oh, this is actually a bit crap. Maybe we're not excited about this anymore." So that's why Max Headroom as a character worked because he tapped into the ideological concept of computer generated characters as opposed to the reality of computer generated characters. And now we're at a point where computer generated characters can be even better than the mocked up version of Max Headroom. But now, because they're using video games and movies and TV shows all the time, the novelty is more than worn off. So, if you were to reinvent Max Headroom for modern day, you have to do something pretty distinctly new with the character for him to hit that same kind of penetration. Otherwise, he's just kind of an annoying asshole that stutters.
I can see that. That is a lot of my feelings about Max Headroom, even when it first came out. I was not
Right,
bought into the craze.
right. Now, let's go back to the show. Uh, uh, I said before, I'm a huge fan of Max Headroom. I always have to kind of qualify the show because Max Headroom, the character, is in fact probably the weakest part of the entire show. Um, so like, but the world they have built around Max just to get him to be a viable concept is fascinating. Also, it was at a very strange point where, again, in the 80s, using popular media as a way of protest was just starting to become a little more mainstream. It had always been present, and certainly in uh, less respectable media like comic books and pulp magazines, which we've talked about, radio even. These kind of protests happen a little more often, but the idea of making it a marketable thing is still reasonably new, at least in American markets. And
Mm,
then CBS was like, "We
mm,
want to
I'm
try
gonna push
something."
back on that.
Okay,
Protest in media has been marketable for some time. We could even go back to like the height of black exploitation, which of itself is a protest, which was wildly popular and successful
on American
for like a
TV though,
pop of time on in America for like
in
that was
America,
in the
yes, talk about
70s.
America television. Talk about CBS, these established networks. That's what I'm talking about.
I'm still gonna say yes.
Okay, all right.
That's a softer yes than the original yes when it was about movies.
Right. See, like, so for me, last time CBS tried this was Star Trek in the 60s, got real strong reaction against that, and CBS came down with very strong restrictions on Roddenberry as a result of certain things. And some people have argued that's part of the reason why. I'm sorry, I keep saying CBS. Yes, no, CBS, right. Star Trek was on CBS. Um, Uh, so there was pushback on that, and they kind of walked away from that. And so, like, it was a long time for them to kind of come around to this. But I will qualify and say, okay, it maybe not American television as a whole, but certainly CBS was reluctant to go this route until around the 80s. They're like, oh, this is actually marketable.
Because there was even oh, I forgot her name now. It wasn't Dorothy Dandridge, but there was a television show that features a black nurse, like, in the late '60s, early '70s, that of itself was, like, following her story, which was pretty revolutionary, and I think it was semi-successful. There's, like, lots of examples of it cropping up throughout the
Okay,
time. So,
okay, all right,
this could be a follow-on of that wave, but I don't wanna overly stress it like this was a big impetus when there's other stuff that happened before it.
that's perfectly fair, and I will gladly take that back. Um, because really, the point I was trying to make there anyway is that CBS has pitched a show that is about critiquing television. And then 10 episodes in, they go, you know what? We're expecting you to criticize television this much, so we're going to pull the plug. Um, there are rumors as to which actual episode that was. I have put in our third slot the one I think that actually did do it. But suffice to say, this show about, hey, media corporations are bad struggles a bit because looking back at it, it's really not doing much of that. It's actually it's not quite apologizing for mass media, but it's certainly not doing nearly the critique that it was accused of doing.
No, not at all. Because if it was, then for really in the show, then you wouldn't have Elliot and Max working for a corporation.
Right,
Like that of itself undercuts the very premise of the show that they're a key factor that makes our corporation a bunch of money. So it's
right.
whole thing.
Now, there are lots and bits of pieces that you can look at and then added together could potentially spell a problem. Um, one example is we don't see much of them, sadly, in these three episodes, but there's a Big Time Television, which is a pirate television station, who is seen extremely sympathetically throughout the course of the show. Um, And so the idea that pirate television is a viable way of getting news out that is in some way ideologically purer than working for a corporation was something that certainly CBS probably was very reluctant to advertise more. And that does shift how it's perceived in the show. Um, but also, uh, each episode is a pretty unvarnished critique. Like the sci-fi veneer is so thin as to be damn near non-existent. Of a wide variety of things this show critiques. Now, again, looking back at a nearly 40-year-old show, some of it's not great, and some of it is aged really well, and some of it's aged very badly, because that's just the nature of this kind of media. But still, to see a show in 1987 take these kinds of shots, even in a somewhat defanged way, is still really impressive.
Yeah, to whoever made it, whoever made like this version of the show and came up with the movie idea, I assumed would have been either drunk or high, and they watched Blade Runner and then Network back to back and went, "Oh my god, this is perfect."
Right, and this is the other thing is, um, well, real quick, the other reason is because, like, this is originally, again, a British thing, so there was a lot of anti-Thatcher sentiment, and anti-Thatcher media was actually extremely popular in British media at the time, whereas America didn't quite have the same anti-Reagan feeling that England had for anti-Thatcher, right? So it's a little bit of a different hit, even though there's a lot of similarities there. But yeah, the reason why I picked this is because it is very much we want to do Blade Runner on like 1/30th of the budget. How do you do Blade Runner on a TV budget? Answer: not great.
That's where the whole piece from Network comes in. If any,
Right.
I think this is like the third time I've talked about the Network. We're gonna have to cover the Network at this point in time,
Probably.
which is a satirical look at what making like network television and media is, and it
Mhm,
has very there are Philip K. Dickian vibes in Network,
mhm.
which is astonishing given I think Network was made in the late '60s off the top of my head. It's
Oh,
a
wow.
Faye Dunaway vehicle, maybe '70s. I think you know what 60s '70s. I'm straddling the line on that, but it
Mhm.
is an intensely powerful movie that is not what you think it is. If you haven't seen it, it's a classic.
Similarly, if you're into shows that critique the media that it is actually on, another one that is a surprisingly stealth one that I didn't realize until I started watching is Sports Night.
Yeah,
Because it starts off as it's a show about a sports show. I don't want to watch that. And it's like, no, it is a barbed critique of television and how it sanitizes and censors the people that work on it.
Aaron Sorkin at his best.
Yes, yes. People are like, "Oh my god, I love The West Wing and whatnot." I was like, honestly, sports night for me. I honestly, not as soon as I said it, I kind of want to watch it again now that I've just talked about it because I remember that show so fondly.
And I think it only got 2.5 seasons, and the first half of the first season, it finds its footing, and then it, like, kicks into high gear.
Yeah, because the first half is generally it's just a sitcom, but for a sports show, and then afterwards, the critique and the satire starts to come in, and it starts to hit stronger and stronger. By the second season, it's hitting really, really hard, and also unrelated to this, but um, has some genuinely good advice on how to manage a team, frankly, because it's one of the few sitcoms where the team manager is not incompetent, is actually really good at his job. So it
That's
has some really good notes in that.
wow. So, yeah, we may have some additional stuff to cover. Now I'm curious
Right.
what we would pair for, like, a sports night run. An Alan Sorkin run.
Maybe, yeah,
Oof,
because there's a fair
oof.
amount of Donald Trump stuff I just haven't watched. So might be
Although,
worth it.
given today's politics, I'm not sure. I think that watching The West Wing now would make me depressed.
Well, right, because it'll be like, oh, remember when politics made sense? Similarly, I
Ugh.
recently watched In the Thick of It, which is a British
I knew it.
similar thing. For those who don't
Peter
know,
Capaldi.
it's a yeah, it's an early Peter Capaldi vehicle, and it's basically what if the blunt nature of The Office was max with The West Wing as a sitcom. And again, it's hard to watch mainly because it's done 15 years ago, and it was back when politicians had things like rules and accountability. And so it's just like I can't watch this because half the jokes are things that just wouldn't be true now. So it's like, ugh, sadly, it is not aged well.
All right, so people are curious how it works when I come up with different seasons. Right now, I have ideas for 3 different seasons based on this 2 minutes of conversation. One of which I'll give you a breakdown right now before we get into this. It's a politics season that would be like maybe 8 episodes, and it would start with Yes, Prime Minister. It'd have
Mm,
In the Thick of It, The West Wing, and I'm gonna make something and probably go with My Fellow Americans as a movie that would be the capstone for the series, but I'm missing like
both
4
versions of House of
things that I'd
Cards,
slot
maybe.
into there. No, I would not want to do House of Cards because of a very problematic lead that I still don't want to talk about.
Well, it was based off a British show, House of Cards, so we could do the British version.
Okay. So, like, this is how it would work. I'd come up with this and I'd like, Eddie, I got this great idea. It should be like 40 episodes long. And he goes, come on, let's be
Right,
realistic. All
right.
right,
Cut it down. Cut it down.
23 episodes long.
Right.
And then we'd work it out from there. So, give you an idea if there's a politics episode right now, you've got an insight into that 10-episode run, how it would work. Then there'd
Right.
be a
And
break
so
at the
when you
5-episode mark.
so when it eventually comes out and 24 episodes long, you know what happens.
Because I'm willing to bet you've never seen Yes, Prime Minister.
I actually have not, and I've heard it's good. I've heard it's good.
It is. I watched it back in the day. But we're not here to talk about good, funny politics. We're here to talk about dystopian futures. So, Eddie,
Right.
let's turn on the news.
Okay. In the bleak dystopian future where downtrodden underclass is ruled by warring television networks and their advertisers, one tough investigative reporter, Edison Carter, strives to make a difference. He is one of the best known on air personalities and satellites globally for what has long been the top rated amongst thousands of television networks, Network 23. While in the field for a hot lead, the network executives inexplicably can the story. His controller, Gorrister, commits the error of leaving him cut off and vulnerable in the field, and Carter comes back to station and punches him out when he returns. Carter then demands a new controller and gets Theora Jones hired away from World 1. So a lot of info dumping at the start. Um, and those 80s computer graphics, man. The wireframe and
I
all of
felt
it.
like I played this video game before.
I know, right?
I was I was reaching for my controller the whole time. I was like, no, that's not it.
And it's amazing because like at the time I didn't see a difference. I was, let's see, 1987, I would have been 12, right? So like I didn't know a difference. Looking back on it now, it is so clear that Max Headroom and every other computer thing you see are completely different scales of possibility. And even then, looking back on it, specifically for this rewatch, even some of the wireframe graphics were probably still hand animated.
That is how incredible it is. Like, that is
Yes.
true art, though. All right, Eddie, you keep talking about Max Headroom, and you've made some jokes about it being amassed and other parts about it being computer generated.
Right.
How much of Matt Fuhrer as Max is rubber mask and makeup versus computer generated animation?
Um, as I understand it, and it's been a long time since I've watched the behind the scenes video on this. Um, Matt Frewer is basically, I say mask, but I'm being reductive. In fact, what it is, it's a lot of it's makeup. He has some, the hair is obviously a prosthetic. His cheekbones and the other parts of his face where they're meant to be more angular, those are also prosthetics, and the rest is just makeup to blend it all in together. The suit he wears is an actual shiny plastic suit. The background is computer generated, but it's also just colored lines in a cube rotating, so it's not hard to make. So he does that in front of a green screen and then records it. He does, as I understand it, he does the lines straight, and then they then edit it to put the stutters and gaps in. So like when he does the jumping around, a lot of that is editing. He does some of that in the acting, but a lot of it is just a jump to jump cuts inside of his monologue to make him bounce around the screen a bit more.
Mm. Now I have even less respect for him as an actor.
Because he didn't do the stuttering
Joking
himself.
aside, well, no, I was hoping he did all the head jerks and everything else himself. The rest of it I figured would have been added. But now,
Well, okay, no, well, okay.
joking aside, so it's
So I mean, to be fair, he does actually do a lot of that himself. It's just they edit it to short it down so it's jumpier, right? So it's not like he's just lazily moving around. Though he's very high energy when he's doing the actual recording. It's just they then cut it to even be more staccato.
have you noticed something though that we've done for this episode so far that we've not done for any other episode of the show we've done over the past 3 years?
Which is what?
We've called Matt Fuhrer by his full name every single time we've talked about
That's
him.
true.
Every
You should go.
single time.
We usually go by surname. That's right. Because that's just his name. His name is Mark Frewer. It's just that is his full name.
Yeah, I'm just what it was just struck me as we're going through, and even when you're talking about the makeup piece, like doop, full name.
Just like
Interesting.
it's just like it's Edison Carter. I mean, I understand sometimes Edison, sometimes Carter, but in my head, he's just Edison Carter. Because the Edison Carter show. He's Edison Carter. He satellites globally, whatever the hell that means. Um, but like, the beginning of this show, especially watching it now with high definition, is peak. How do you make Blade Runner on like 50 pence a day? Because like that whole city thing is absolutely just a model, like Godzilla movie level of model. It's I mean, there's some really cool things, like they have the light, the glowing neon sign, and lights in the windows and whatnot. But I mean, it's very, very clearly a model shot. It's trying
but
so hard.
It's beautifully built, though. It's better than, like, having being a matte painting that they just pop up on the screen.
Yeah, yeah, no, yeah,
So that's
absolutely.
the 2 comparison points at the time that you'd go for it. I didn't really rather have a model.
No, totally. I mean, like, given the technology at the time, that was the only viable option, and it was the right choice. I'm not dinging him for making the choice. It is just that's one piece when you look back at it, and it's just like after watching Blade Runner, after watching Ghost in the Shell, after watching Akira, seeing that cityscape is a step down.
We are both massive fans of old school Doctor Who. I cannot ding anyone on their budgets, their models, or anything when they make it. You have not heard me negatively comment on Max Headroom's appearance because I am a Doctor Who fan. And I rewatched Tom Baker stuff the other day, and I saw like the set shaking, so I have no complaints. Loved it.
Quick digression. Since you mentioned Tom Baker, and I made a passing reference, I feel I should explain this. There's an infamous moment where a PBS station, I want to say New York, but I can't be for certain, they were showing an episode of Doctor Who, Horror Fang Rock, Tom Baker episode.
Oh, good
And
one.
in the middle of it, someone wearing a Max Headroom mask managed to break into the transmission and just babble for like 6, 7 minutes before PBS managed to get control of their network again. So that is infamous intersection of Max Headroom and Doctor Who in the mid '80s. Pirate television, just it was a very zeitgeist moment, which has lived on in infamy since then.
And if I remember
But
right, that's the one where they had like a sort of a painted, corrugated thing behind him that kept floating around like it was Max's background, right?
yep,
And
yep,
then it ended with the person standing up and showing like their butt to the camera, if memory
yeah,
serves.
yeah. It was pure puerile humor. And it was very much what you would how you would make Max Headroom on a cosplay budget. But it hit for some reason. This thing fandom remembers.
And those people that did it have yet to be found.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
is how good
No
they
one
were.
knows. No one knows. Um, but again, the model shot, like the other reason why I lovingly poke fun at it is because also uh, it's one thing to see it in this first episode. And go, that's actually really impressive. For 1985 on a television budget, it's actually really cool. When they use that same shot for most every episode going forward, it starts to get a little tired. you know?
But that's what you do. They probably spent the massive budget to build that model, and that model is needed to be in every single episode to make that worthwhile.
Right. It is much like this is why you have to see Star Trek Enterprise in every episode because we paid a lot for that model.
Was the helicopter shot really on their set, or do they take that from another movie or something, if you know, to put it into this series? Because I think the helicopter shot would cost a lot of money, and I question if they have the budget for that.
I think that was just one of the TV helicopters, and they just borrowed it. Because this is what the thing is that because it was primarily a CBS production. So CBS is footing the bill, and part of the way they got a lot of stuff around this because they just used equipment that was lying around CBS. Like the cameras were all old news cameras that had been broken or whatever. So they used them as props, mocked them up.
So I guess a slight digression. Not even still kind of important. If there's a remake of this show today, having recently watched The Residence and Paradise, and if I
Mhm.
remember right, I think Jake Tappard showed up on one of those. I think it was The Resident, or was it like Zero with what's an arrow? Either way, if this was remade today, it would probably have some real life journalists showing up at the show like Jake Tappert or Chris Hayes to give the show validity, which I think would be
Probably
interesting to see in which
right.
direction then they would go with Edison in
Well,
comparison.
now, and that's another thing about this show is that uh, although I don't see it in the first season, it becomes more prevalent in the second season. The subtitle for the show is the same as the movie 20 Minutes in the Future, and it becomes never told didactically in the story, but is very much implied that this is just at some point in the future. A bit like we talked about with Batman Beyond briefly. Batman Beyond is also at some vague point in the future. Um, and so I'll talk about this later, but I'll talk about it now. A bit like Batman Beyond, the show intentionally kind of goes anachronistic as well as forward looking in some of its the way its technology is put together to kind of make it a slightly more timeless. It is not our future, but it is some future to us. to kind of give it an interesting conceit. So, I mean, I think if the intent to do a modern day was like that, where it's like, let's reference modern things, but also try to make a slightly more timeless future, it could potentially do reasonably well. It's just the one of the conceits is that when you have a show called Max Headroom needs a feature in every episode, but Max Headroom as a character is extremely limited for a lot of reasons, and we'll go into some of those throughout this conversation. There's not so much you can do. Luckily, the show establishes that it takes a lot of time to make sure that Edison Carter is equally, if not more important to the show, because Edison Carter could do a lot more than Max Headroom can.
Yeah. But when to your point though, that's all interesting because Max is effectively in what, roughly 5 minutes per episode?
Yeah. Because I'm actually gonna save my comments Max when we appear him
All right.
because I have opinions on that. Anything else about this first opening chunk?
Yes. The fact that they tase that old woman on camera like it's nothing.
Yes,
Like
yes.
that's boop, boop, nothing.
This was yeah. You have to say this was like 7 or 8 p.m. when it showed. Like so this wasn't late night, and they were doing some violent stuff for 1987 at 8 p.m. on a Friday night or Saturday night, one of the two.
So that still struck me is pretty intense because she's on camera literally as she's being tased.
Hmm.
And then it makes
Yeah,
you wonder, are people calling the network to find out what's going on? Does no one care? Are we sort of in a Judge Dredd world where it's okay? They're the cops. They'll do whatever they want. No one really cares enough to fight against it.
right. Right. I mean, the only and there's a timing issue, because officially, the way that the scene is edited, Edison was on the air when that happened. We don't
Mm-hmm.
know if there is a time delay. That's something that's common in network news now. I don't remember if it was common then, but in my head, I always assumed it was on a time delay, and so they cut it off. They saw that, they cut the story, but that last 3 seconds didn't broadcast, so it never actually aired. But you're right. Now they're talking about it. Nothing in the show itself tells you that.
Yeah, and if and I'd almost think it's definitely not because we have the executives watching as it happens, and the executives, I don't think they ever show them having like a specific feed that they watch network from, other than the camera they're watching in the control room. So they're watching it on television as it occurs.
Right. Later, it is implied they have a private feed, purely because Max Headroom is able to infiltrate it. But again, that is reading between the lines for a show that is, let's be blunt, not really subtle. So I don't want to necessarily give them that.
So that was interesting. That really struck me the most for this entire piece is like no one called in about that at all, like it was nothing.
Yeah. Mhm.
And the Gorson punching, we all would have done that. Anyone that comes back after you barely survive, decking that guy at best.
Yeah. And I mean, like, Gorster's, I mean, that's the point. He's supposed to be an asshole, but like, Murray says, bring him in. And Gorster says, I'm bringing you in, and then cuts his feed and then just walks away from the station functionally. And I'm like, there is in no way, shape, or form you are bringing him in. You've just, and so Edison's, Gorster, the infamous line, I'm bringing you in, you cut me off, is absolutely true. Edison is correct. Gorster did cut him off. So you're right. Gorster should have been punched, should have been fired.
Now, my thing that I'm not 100% sure of is why did the security throw Edison out? If the camera's been cut off, they definitely tase that old woman. We never see her again, so we assume she's going to a body bank. Um, what makes Edison special enough to just be thrown out other than he is the main character, and if he gets killed here, we have no more show.
Um, the implication, which again is not set up at this stage, it's later on in the episode, is that Edison Carter is world famous. So murdering again, this is a time period where murdering a world famous reporter is actually a bad thing, as opposed to a thing that certain governments just do as a matter of course and get away with.
Ridiculous.
Yes.
And this also has just enough of the chauvinism to tick all the boxes. when he first meets Theora, and I'll
Yes.
leave it at that.
Yes. It's gonna get worse. Let's move on. When he tries to continue investigating the story, Carter's blocked at a high level, but he eventually learns that the Network 23 executives know something about the mysterious event. With Theora's help, he breaks into an R&D lab of Network 23's clandestine teenage technical genius Bryce Lynch. There, he discovers a secret Rebus tape that shows how a new form of compressed commercial, known as a blipvert, designed by Lynch and exclusive Network 23, causes extremely slothful viewers to explode. Grossberg and most of the Network 23 board want the profitable and compelling blipverts to continue despite the risk. While Carter is viewing the secret tape, Bryce Lynch sends network security guards to capture him, and he is sent running for his life. In an epic hacking battle between Bryce and Theora, Bryce manages to force up an exit barrier that knocks Carter from his speeding motorcycle. The last thing Carter sees before he goes unconscious is the clearance warning of the exit gate, Max Headroom 2.3 meters. Network 23 President Grossberg allows Bryce to perform a cerebral scan of the unconscious Carter, transferring his memory to an AI program that theoretically could read Carter's memories to find out what he's learned about the blipverts. When the AI clone is started up, all I can remember at first is Max Headroom. So, uh, to your misogyny point, um, Edison straight up is sniffing Theora while she's trying to do her job.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's not great. um, I will mildly defend that the show. Okay. One of the things the show is trying to do, but I think because of CBS interference, it never quite establishes, but it's a little clearer, I think, in the original British pilot, is that Edison Carter's not necessarily a good guy either. He's just right. He is flawed. He is obsessed. He's in the original movie. In my mind, he's painted a bit more like a Captain Ahab style, where like he will dash himself on the rocks to get to the truth kind of character. So these kinds of things make a little more sense in the original script, where he is kind of a jerk to all of his colleagues, including Murray. But because he does such a good job, they kind of put up with it. Whereas Max is the more lighthearted part of Edison, and so it's more of a Jekyll and Hyde moment, where Edison is a slightly darker version of it, and Max is a slightly lighter, more free of constraints, trickster version of Edison. The CBS version, I think, muddies that a lot more. And as the show goes on, Edison's respect for Theora continues to improve. He starts treating her more like a colleague than as a sex object. But this first episode is really bad about that.
I wouldn't see Edison sniffing Gorster. That's all I'm going to say.
Right, right. No, I mean, again, it's not great, but the sexual component of it does ramp down, and then later ramps back up when CBS wanted more of a romantic subplot. But there is genuine respect after this first episode. This first episode, yeah, no, Edison is straight up being a creepy pervert.
And when we actually get a shot of inside Network 23 and seeing all the characters there, my first thought, because I'd never seen this before, was Michael, there's always money in the banana stand, is my immediate thought when I saw all the people that were there.
There is, yes, Arrested Development is kind of a Max Headroom reunion, isn't it?
And I loved it. And I kept laughing the whole time.
Yes. That's another thing is this show is aged well because it is also a lot of people who went on to be reasonably famous after this show. So it is that always joy of finding like for example when I found uh Daniel Craig in an episode of 90s historical fiction show. It's like seeing people in their early roles. Like, oh, I know that guy. That's so cute. And we have another one of those coming up actually, so that's fun.
All right. So, what about this show appeals so much to 12-year-old Eddie? Because I'm sitting here thinking to myself, watching it now as a much older, not 12-year-old Chris. This show would not have would not have captivated me as a youngster.
So, for me, it was the idea of well, it's a combination of things. Um, the idea that a single person with the right technology and the right guts can find the truth and topple people in power was a very compelling thing. Um, for context, prior to this, I was watching a lot of Tom Baker era Doctor Who, which is a very charismatic person in the right place with the right technology, is able to topple people in power. So there's definitely a through line of things I am enjoying in the zeitgeist in the 80s.
I too was
Um,
watching those Tom Bakers, and I would think that still this show doesn't do it. Maybe it's just because I inherently don't like Matt Frewer. I think is what it is. There's something
sure.
about him that like, ah.
The other thing also is I got my first computer, my Commodore 64,
Mm,
in 1986.
okay.
So I was really into computers. I was making my own games on the computer. I was that into computers. And so this is also a show about computers and how people in computers can do things. And so this hacking battle when I was a kid was the coolest thing I had ever seen. And looking at it now, I love it for completely different reasons.
I think that's it. I think that's like the missing equation because I didn't have a computer. We grew up very, 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 very like dirt poor in Alabama.
Mhm.
So I think I had my first computer is when I bought one myself in my 20s.
Right. Now, in my case, my my family got it for me. It was my birthday and my Christmas presents. And specifically, I was told I had to do a certain amount of percentage of my time and homework or in learning on it because it was an investment in me to learn about computers. My mom thought the computers were going to be something that I should consider as a career option. So it was an educational tool as well as a thing. But like that was like most of my family's budget for that year went into that Commodore. Um, so I had a Commodore, but also like most of the games, I straight up copied floppies, right? So I think the only game I actually bought was the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy Infocom game.
Now in my brain, I've rewritten the entire history of Eddie. You're essentially Matthew Broderick now with your computer getting ready to play war games. And I keep hearing the phrase keep popping up, do you want to play a game? And there's just like Eddie going, yes. So that is now how I've rewritten your entire history. I hope you're happy.
Good, 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 good.
Retcon.
Um, Now I love this hacking battle because it is so camp, right? Like it is peak people pounding on keyboards very aggressively, and the fact that Bryce is in his bathroom while he's doing it is just amazing. Like, of course, the super hacker has a separate computer hacking rig in his toilet specifically for these kinds of moments. He didn't bring a laptop in. He's not on his phone. He has a whole arm with a computer on it. He swings around so that he can sit on the toilet and hack into computer systems. That's just fantastic.
There's so many jokes I can make. So many of them. And I choose none of them. Is it not more disconcerting that Theora is amazing and awesome. It is so amazing that she can hack into this major corporation's computer systems and go toe to toe with the genius of Bryce, whose entire occupation is computer hacker slash scientist.
Right. Yes. Which leads to one of the I don't want to say criticisms of the show, the tropes probably of the show, is that the computer science might as well be magic, right? It is not even Star Trek levels of we have vaguely based this on science. This show is like I've seen a computer once. I've had it explained to me maybe, but I don't really care about any of that. And so we're just gonna make up a bunch of shit about computers. So computers make no goddamn sense in this show. So how Theora rates next to Bryce is a fascinating question. Again, part of the problem of turning this into an actual long-running show is that in the original movie, Bryce is a villain. Bryce is supposed to be there to be defeated, and so this arc makes more sense because Theora is good, but not as good as Bryce. Bryce ends up defeating her in the battle, capturing Edison, scanning his brain, and so Theora manages to help Edison to defeat Bryce because she is able to operate in the real world in a way that Bryce is incapable of. That's how the arc goes. But if you want to make Bryce a protagonist, we can't go that route. So Bryce is just kind of better than Theora, but just doesn't want to do it, which is not great.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Since I haven't seen that movie, I was curious about the Bryce character because everything about the character is villain coded from start to finish. Even the lack of concern about people impacted by the Blipverts. It's like, "I just make the bombs, I don't drop them." It's like, "Ooh, ooh, how
Right.
is"
So, in the show, Bryce is kind of coming across as just a teenage kid who maybe doesn't understand the consequences of his actions. Um, in the movie, when Grossberg is like, "What do I do about Edison Carter?" Bryce straight up says, "You could just kill him," which leads to this conflict about the brain scan. Bryce wants to murder Edison Carter in the original movie, and Grossman's like, "No, we can't kill him. He's too popular and makes us too much money." Which is a much more interesting conflict than what we actually got on the screen, which is Bryce kind of going, "But I could do this for science and it would be fun," and Grossberg going, "I guess maybe scan his brain." So I admit this is one where the rewrite, and again, it's almost shot for shot the original movie. I keep imprinting the original movie onto the show sometimes, and it's like, oh, it's so much better if they had gone this way. But for some reason they decided to keep Bryce as the plucky kid scientist.
We know how I feel about those guys
Right,
and gals
right.
and people in general. Did you see the moonlighting connection in this show?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't.
Uh, Grossberg here is, in fact, David Addison's brother in Moonlighting. Well, at least the actor is,
Oh,
if not the character.
okay. All right. That's cool.
He played a
I
lot of those
feel
characters in the 80s.
yeah. You could tell he probably played Evil Yuppie very well.
Yeah.
Um, I will say that his, neck jerk gets real distracting after a while through this episode.
These are solid acting choices, Eddie. Okay. You've talked about how great the hacking scene is, and it was fun to watch it go from like back to back with your almost got it. No, I don't have it.
Yes.
How else would one make hacking exciting?
And that's the thing, right? Like, it's really hard to do that. Um, uh, uh, Having watched other movies about hacking, it's a big challenge. So in a way, Max Headroom's approach as a show, like this problem is I have to clarify. I talked about the show, not the character. The way the Max Headroom show's approach handles it is to just say it's basically magic is better because we could have super exciting graphics that make zero sense in OS. Right? There's no way that because if you made it look like actual computer stuff, it would just be lines of code. And as we've learned from other media, that's not entertaining. You have to find other ways of doing it. But no one knew what hacking looked like in 1887, so there was no requirement to make it look remotely realistic.
Can wait like a decade later, decade or two later, and just put Angelina Jolie on the screen hacking, and then it all works out.
Right. Because then it's interesting for different reasons.
And even for that, though, the joke aside, is didn't they have them essentially? It became some hacking and gleaming the cube mashed together where they're on skateboards hacking, or is that just in my brain that I dreamed that, which I'll now make into a game as a trademark?
No, I think that's sneakers, isn't it?
I didn't think so. We're not doing a hacking montage. I'm gonna tell you that now.
Although we could do an entire run of 90s era computer hacker movies.
Oh my god, we'd have to cover the net.
Cover the net, but we also cover hackers, cover sneakers.
Wasn't sneakers in the 2000s?
Oh, maybe. Or 90s or 2000s, because I think the net was also early 2000s.
We would get to see though Sidney Poitier from Call Me Mr. Tibbs all the way up into where he's a hacker.
That'd be amazing. Same character. Keep 'em again. Anything else about the exciting hacking montage?
No, I guess not. Although RoboCop came out and was it 83, 84?
Yeah, right before this.
Do you think they took inspiration from that corporate room scene to build this corporate room scene?
I think so. Um, I feel like long table, shadowy corporate rooms kind of solidified its form around the mid '80s. Um, because I mean, to be fair, RoboCop probably inspired their corporate scene from mob scenes, mafia films that also had similar long tables, people sitting around being menacing. So, like, I feel like that's kind of where the connection. And at a guess, having not watched RoboCop in a long time, it was probably meant to be a visual homage to look, the corporation is actually also the mob. right? I think that's probably what the my
Okay.
guess would be that would be the intent here. I feel like that's also the intent here to a certain amount. Again, part of the problem of this show is that when you're doing a one movie, having the board directors be more or less evil is fine. Grossberg is the villain. You topple him, cool. But Network 23 has to continue after this episode, so that sets up another problem, which we'll talk about in a minute here.
Yeah. You mean the other corpo that's roaming around who I don't know the name of, that is sort of not a bad corpo? Maybe like
Cheviot,
mm, yeah.
yeah, we'll talk about Chevy. Let's go talk about Chevy right now. To keep the secret of the Rebus tape and the Blipvert problem, Grossberg decides to have both Carter and his controller Gorrister disposed of. Two thugs kill Gorrister and take Carter's unconscious body to a body bank, a wrecking yard for human parts. Theora stumbles onto Gorrister's delivery to the body bank and is led to Carter, who she buys back and takes to her apartment to recover. Meanwhile, Grossberg delights showing off Max Headroom to the network board as the world's first fully programmable presenter. Network's 23 ratings soar within minutes of putting Max on their broadcast. Not that they have much choice, as Max has escaped into the network's computers and is no longer under anyone's control. Carter corners Bryce Lynch in his studio and pries the story out of him, meeting Max in the process. Although the Rebus tape is in Grossberg's hands, the viewing of it is in Carter's, and thus Max's memories. Carter confronts Grossberg at the press conference announcing Carter's death, and after showing the Rebus tape to the world, demands an answer about the Blipvert problem. The final decision to go live with the story comes from Network 23 board director and now president, Ben Cheviot. Grossberg is out, Lynch is reformed, kind of. Cheviot takes over Network 23, and Max Headroom is loose on Network 23 to cry havoc at every turn. I mentioned before I wanted to talk about Max Headroom a little more when he shows up, and here he is. Um, One of the things that it took me a while to realize as a fan of this show is that the show constantly repeated tells you that Max is the world's first AI. That, he's a computer program. He's a computer. Um, Watching it over the years and then eventually rewatching it now really solidifies for me. None of that is thematically true. Max Headroom is just television. He is pure television. Outside of television, Max makes no sense. Max only makes sense inside of television. So Max Headroom as a character is meant to be. He's not really critiquing computers. He's critiquing television. So if you think of him as a trickster god who television is his platform, his medium, a lot of Max makes sense. It doesn't make him any better as a character. He's still an extremely thin character that has a very limited potential, partially because he is limited to television, right? He only can be on television, which means you have to have a screen somewhere for him to be on, for him to be part of the show. Now, luckily, the visual conceit of 20 Minutes in the Future is that there are screens fucking everywhere. If someone has a oil barrel burning with flame around it and a bunch of unhoused people sitting around it, for some reason there'll be a working television next to them where Max can show up, because in the future TVs are just constantly everywhere, which, now in a world where all of our devices have TV screens on them, kind of works.
True. Now this makes me wonder if a certain problematic creator, alleged problematic creator, because I don't know, it's been fully thing, haven't kept up with the case of it. Is this where they got their inspiration for one of their gods in their books that does
Yeah.
similar things to this? Because if you're saying it's like an original British idea that came across to America, it would make sense that they pulled their idea from this, and that character in their book sort of represents different aspects of what Max is doing here. And
Right.
also explains why it can pop up into every single computer, even if it has no every single television, if it has no power going to it.
Right. We'll dodge around the creator, but American Gods is the novel you're talking about. And it did come out after Max Headroom became popular. So it's entirely plausible. There's a line of inspiration from Max Headroom to the god of television, which one of the few things I love about the TV show is they got Gillian Anderson to play her in the TV show. So having someone who's so known for television roles playing the goddess of television was a fantastic choice. But besides that, yes, the idea is that if you think of the idea that computers are basically magic, then Max Headroom is a trickster god of television. And from that perspective, Max makes a lot more sense to me because he's a trickster. He's not there to follow your rules. He's not an anarchist per se because he does have his own rules. They're just opaque to you because he's not human. He has never been human. He has simply got human memory stuck in his head, but he has never had a human existence.
He's a beyonder.
Yes, someone has to teach this man how to poop.
Oh, how many weeks in a row can I make a beyonder joke? Jesus.
I think it's 3 in a row so far, so keep going.
It is
Um,
that is a great correlation to make. It hadn't really occurred to me because I didn't think about it on that level as I was watching it. And it's most I'm seeing it and I'm agreeing to it because they only occasionally make offhanded reference in a later episode about like I was moving between the files, which then infers it's a computer system. But he was created by a computer system, but he's not necessarily linked to that. And he primarily moves through like their network, wherever their network would broadcast to. Essentially, then Max would like be broadcast over those finger quotes airwaves.
right, and this goes to another point which I was gonna allude to, but I kind of lost my train of thought because I'm old. But another reason why I think this only works in 85 to 87 is in this time period, the default way of using a computer is to hook it up to a television screen. The fully independent computer monitors don't really happen until the late 80s or 90s, right? So most people have a home computer hooked up to their TV. So the blurring of computers and TVs also happening around this time period. So Max being both TV and computer makes a lot more zeitgeist sense in that time period.
Interesting.
Um,
How did you
but
like the resolution of this, though? Is that the way they resolved it is to pull Edison's memory from Max to broadcast that since they lose the tape?
right, this is a start of what you'll definitely see as we go through this, which is we have to find a reason why Max is vital to the plot, and this is pretty ham-fisted. And I'm gonna be honest. It there are only a few places where it gets less ham-fisted. But this one is certainly the only reason why uh, Grossberg doesn't just delete Max completely is because the show says they can't, and also because they need to get Edison's memories. Right? Um, that's not how memory works. Memory is not that crystal clear. Memories never worked that way. It's not like this is a new scientific thing we've just discovered. We've always known memory has been fuzzy and vague. So it just doesn't make sense.
But Bryce
And
explained it to us.
right, and that's what it comes down to is as long as Bryce explains it, then it's just okay. That's just how the rules work because Bryce is the person who tells us how the rules of the world work. That's his role as a character.
Ah,
Um,
interesting.
but I will say emotionally, I like it because this is why whenever I would play Cyberpunk 2020, I would almost always play a media, is because I wanted to have that moment of pointing a camera at a corporate exec, live on air, showing evidence I've found, and tearing a company down, right? It's a cool moment. The problem is, because again, it has to be a TV show, Ben Cheviot, the quote unquote good corporate, allows it to go live and damage their company's brand. And like, this sets up two completely different problems. A, it implies that there's one good corporate inside the corporation. So that way, the head of the company will always have Edison's back, which means there's almost no tension inside Network 23. And B, makes no sense because Ben Chevy, his reasons up to this point were always worried about the reputation of Network 23, and now he is actively and intentionally damaging that same reputation.
But see, that makes perfect sense for a corporate person, though, because by removing Grossberg, he then becomes new president of the company, which
Right,
lets you
but
get rid of a rival.
and if Cheviot was presented as more Weasley than he was, that would be fine. But that's not how he's framed. He's framed as the only corporate with morals. And the show continues that trend, sadly.
So, all right. I guess this is where we get into a quandary about morals. that's where then you go in around the route, what is for the greater good? Do I uphold my own super high moral standards and we won't do it because it'll hurt the corporate's reputation? Or do I let Edison take down Grossberg, which temporarily damages the company, but then I can put the corporation's reputation back and remove Grossberg, whose influence will continue to diminish the company?
No, I can see that. And for the last 5 minutes of a 45-minute episode about high tension and drama, there's really not very many other ways you can go with this, right? I accept that. Um, but from pure corporate logic, the correct answer is to fire him and bury this story. Because we have to remember also, and to the show's credit, this is a reoccurring subplot from the season one. Um, their biggest sponsor is Zigzag, and Zigzag is completely behind the Blipbirds program. They're also simultaneously wrecking Zigzag's reputation by doing this. So not only are they ruining their own reputation, but also the reputation of their number one financial supporter. So
But
I see what you're saying.
we've established though how many ratings Edison and now Max both get, which means they could bring in more sponsors. Like I can see both sides of it where you're going, so I'm just
Sure, right.
enjoying like highlighting each.
Yeah,
And
and the thing is, like, there is a different way you could go from this ending, but that's not where the show goes. So, and that's my frustration with it. It's like if they went a different direction, like, cool, fuck Zigzag, we'll find new corporate sponsors, and then the challenge of Network 23 building itself back up and building its respect in the industry, trying to rebuild its ratings as a result, would be an interesting story. No, as far as Network 23, it continues, but basically Cheviot slides in, Zigzag's kind of annoyed, but otherwise things go pretty much as they were, with almost no repercussions for Network 23. So that's my and they're even addressed, like, is it because the audience is so desensitized to these kinds of scandals that they don't even care anymore? Which again would be a fascinating concept to play into, especially nowadays, right?
Mhm.
Because as CEOs get interchanged, but the corporations keep rolling out their inhuman processes and policies, you know, that's something else. Like, okay, so another CEO got fired. Who the fuck cares, right? So that is an interesting point. But the show building up to this implied that Grossberg has ultimate power. But again, um, the show, to the show's credit, it does slightly undercut it because Grossberg is completely unaware that Gorster's been fired. He's really intent on getting Gorster killed, and repeatedly refers to Gorster as Edison's controller, not knowing that the controller's been replaced. So he's not omnipotent. He's not aware of absolutely everything that happens in his company.
Well, because that gets into the minutia that would be well below his pay grade.
Right, which is interesting. There's another subplot where the financial records of Network 23 become a big deal, but again, the board aren't as familiar with it because again, it's the minutia of operating the company. They don't care about.
Overall, though, if I'd seen this when I was 12 or 13, I do not think I would continue on after having finished this first episode.
Yeah, that's fair.
Watching it
It's
now as a more aged viewer of television, I would give it my usual 3 episodes before I made a choice.
okay, fair enough. Um, I will point you, however, as an old school cyberpunk fan, a role playing game fan like myself, both Shadowrun and Cyberpunk, the fact that Theora straight up using a cred stick at one point, the whole roughly 6-inch long metal tube that you stick in a slot and pay money to, it's like Shadowrun straight up lifted that.
As an old school Shadowrun fan, because that's what I played well before I started playing Cyberpunk, because I like the magic aspect of it. Yes. And although watching it now, I thought the whole time though that like this is literally just a Cyberpunk game that someone didn't get to play in, so they wrote it.
Yeah, except for the fact that Cyberpunk came out 5 years later. But yes.
They
Actually, no, sorry, I
they
take it back. It
snuck
came out a
into
year
Mike's
later.
room while he was creating the
Right.
game, and it's like, oh, and then made their TV
No,
show.
you can understand why I saw this show, and then 2 years later, I saw the box set for Cyberpunk and immediately gravitated to it, right? I mean, there's a lot of like, Network 54 and Network 23, I mean, come on.
I okay. So, do you still play journalist when you play Cyberpunk? Is that your
No,
go-to
although I
medius?
did When I had an opportunity to write my own cyberpunk interactive novel, like cyberpunk in a genre, not cyberpunk red or anything, the protagonist was a media. In fact, if you want to, it's a game called Ratings War, and so the main character was a media. It was very much my homage to Edison Carter and the Max Headroom show. So I don't play them anymore because, frankly, if you're playing a media, the game kind of just center around you being a media in the same way that you're playing Netrunner, you kind of need to center around being a Netrunner. So I don't do it just because that shifts the tone of the game too much. So I try to play more with what fits into the group. But I still have a soft spot for the cyberpunk media, frankly.
Nice. So if we do get Jay to come back and we do this cyberpunk red
Mhm.
game that we talked about doing, Jesus, like 2 years ago now, what would you play?
I mean, if everyone's like, no, yeah, we're going to do a whole media based game, then yeah, we'll play media.
Don't
If it's
worry
more
about
of a
what else
traditional,
is going to do it. If
but
what
but but
what's Eddie going to play?
if we're doing a traditional kind of you're all mercs, as it were, um, I would probably gravitate towards Solo or Rocker Boy these days.
Okay, interesting.
Anyway, anything else about the pilot?
Nope, 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 nope,
Okay,
nope, nope. I was
move
hoping
on.
though at the end of the pilot that I would not see Bryce anymore.
Yeah, sadly, could see a lot more of Bryce.
Yeah.
He's in the opening credits. You're gonna see him again. Um, Body bags. The brutal body snatchers, Bruegel and Mailer, are back and now openly hunting live specimens who are good tissue matches for wealthy clients. They run down a woman, test her for a match by extracting a patch of skin from her back with a saw, then haul her away, leaving the man with her beaten senseless. Meanwhile, the wealthy figure Plantagenet is pressuring board member Miss Julia Formby to deliver the Max Headroom process to help to preserve his dying mother's memories, as she can no longer be kept alive with transplants. He threatens to ruin Sheffield if he does not get the process, and insists Formby in particular knows how he can do it. In the background, Edison Carter is breaking a huge news story, that of a massive amounts of old industrial waste underlying the city, or at least in the fringes, where the down and out live. As the opening elements of the main story unfold, we hear Carter excoriating the politicians and parents of the prior generation for hiding this deadly waste and then forgetting it was there. As the Network 23 board watches the end of Carter's report, Cheviot receives a call from the chairman of Zigzag Corporation who wants Max Headroom to pitch their products.
As a side note of people, if I were the one that had to cover this Max Headroom show today and I got the opening
Mhm.
quote, I would have not have pulled a quote from Max Headroom because of this episode. I would have pulled my quote from Repo the Genetic Opera.
Oh, really? What would you use?
I'm not sure off the top of my head, but have you seen Repo the Genetic Opera? It's
Oh,
a
yes.
musical, so I'm
I
gonna
saw it in theaters, actually, when it first came out.
I all right, that is the most stunning thing you've said to date because I know how you feel about
Really?
musicals. Yes, out of everything you told me.
Now,
Yes.
I will say it is because it was pitched as a spiritual sequel to Rocky Horror Picture Show. My wife is a
There you
huge
go.
fan of Rocky, was in a Rocky fan. So she wanted to go see it. And I was like, oh, it's a post apocalyptic thing. I'll enjoy that too. And I did genuinely enjoy Repo. A little
And
white
so
wow.
in case people are curious, this entire opening scene here and part of the last episode are essentially Repo the Genetic Opera, except in a 2.5 hour version with Paris Hilton, I think, if I remember right
Yes.
off the top of my head in there for some reason,
Yes. And Anthony Head.
who is actually a singer that I found out at one point in time was like had his own albums and everything else, much how
Yeah.
Eddie Murphy had his own albums too.
Also true. Also exists.
Because he in fact liked to party all the time.
Party all the time.
I
Party all
had
the
to do it.
time.
Now
No.
that you've started
Uh,
me on this digression, the other night,
I
come on.
started you. Yes, go ahead.
What else do we do other than digress? We give the illusion we're going to talk about something else, and we just like talk about whatever we want to with that as a background. That all right? We're gonna change the entire name of the show to like backdrop.
Right.
I
Digressions.
went down a rabbit hole the other night with my daughter because I was solo parenting because she had like a little bit of time for it to go to bed. She's like, "Show me music videos how I used to." I was like, "Oh, let's do this,"
Oh,
and I would show
no.
her different music videos. And this is specifically to your original comment about Matt Frewer and how when he was dressed as Max Headroom, he was in a plastic suit. One of them that we watched was Lionel Richie, like dancing all night long.
Uh-huh.
because it's a good song, and she'd seen like Dancing on the Ceiling by Lionel Richie and everything else. And when it popped up in the music video, her first question is, "Why is he wearing leather pants? What if it rains?" Boom! Like that was the entire encapsulation of it. Leather pants. What if it rains? That's not going to be good.
Speaking of which, I forgot to mention in the 1985-1987 gap where Max Headroom was popular, did you know Max Headroom's also in an official music video?
I'm not
He
surprised.
he was in the Paranormia video by Art of Noise in 1986.
I'm trying to remember that song now.
It's basically the only lyric that is not Max Headroom is literally just the word Paranormia over and over again, and then Max Headroom talking to himself as he tries to fall asleep is the whole song. So at one point, it's
Ridiculous.
Max like, "Please let me sleep, poetry," and he starts writing off some poetry, and he goes, "Huh, doesn't even rhyme," and then it goes back to Paranormia, Paranormia, Paranormia. It was Art of Noise. It was in their experimental period. It's weird, but it was in a music video.
Ridiculous. To that extent, though, before we get back on point, is once I put her down for night and she went to bed, I myself continued down that rabbit hole, watching
Oh
like
no!
Cure music videos, Public Enemy music videos, 99 Nails, Eddie, Dead Milk Bed, and it just
Wow,
spiraled out from there.
wow.
Hey, do you remember the music video for Punk Rock Girl?
I no, actually, I love the song, but I've never actually seen the video, or if I have, I don't remember it.
You should watch that when we're done recording.
I should, yeah. I love Dead Milkman.
Anyway, all that to say, this opening scene with the body bags, them like cutting off pieces
Yes.
of skin, reminded me of Repo the Genetic Opera. Like that long road trip right back to the ship.
No, totally. I mean, the kind of Max Headroom meets cyberpunk vibe, is definitely embodied by the 2 body snatchers. Um, and
Did
yeah,
you see the
it's cool.
Justified link here? I could like do this all day because I know so
No,
many
what is the
actors and
Justified link?
actresses.
Clearly. Again,
Uh,
a lot of actors.
the main body bag guy is a
Frugal.
villain in Justified, like a minor villain.
Huh. Huh, okay.
It took me a second to recognize him with like he was a lot younger and in his cyber necro gear
Right.
trademark.
Yes. Um, in the original movie, because these 2 characters from the were also in the pilot, we just didn't talk about them much. Um, Frugal is wearing, chaps with no pants under them, so he just has his ass hanging out.
I thought that's what everybody did in the future.
Right. In the future, you just don't wear trousers. Just wear
Do you
chaps.
know why?
Because it's warm in the future? I don't know why.
Damn it, you stole half my joke. Global warming. That's going to be the punchline. Japan. It's a dark punchline because the future is dark.
Right. Um, speaking of which, our ongoing trends, what is Tokyo called in the cyberpunk universe? This is New Tokyo, not Neo Tokyo.
Ridiculous. Can't
Um,
stop.
Also, there's a moment where the chairman of Zigzag actually has a Chinese name, a Japanese name, and the whole time I was wondering, is this an interesting look at how the Asian world also conglomerates and blurs over in much the same way the Western world is doing in cyberpunk, or is it just shitty writing by Americans?
My go-to will always just be shitty writing by Americans.
That's probably the answer, but it did lead me down an interesting rabbit hole of like, what if you are the Chinese head of a primarily Japanese company, and what is the social implications of that, and how much do you have to kind of balance that? I mean, like, this is an interesting concept that I'm absolutely sure the writers had no way, shape, or form intended.
I much like they didn't do any research on computers, they probably did no research on that.
Right, right. Um, I did like how Cheviot uh, tries to do Japanese, and then the chairman's like, "Just fuck it, just shut up." And it's like, what? I like that. That's a good moment. It's like, I could do just no. You're bad. Be quiet. I'm mad at you.
It was an interesting opening that was a little bleak, so I liked it, and it sort of started to pull me in.
Yeah. Um,
Oh, ooh,
Again,
that
this
reminds me.
is
We
not a
didn't talk
subtle
about it.
show. Oh, go
Sorry,
ahead.
go ahead. We didn't talk about it last time, but when Theora goes to the body bank to buy Edison,
Yep.
it's an interesting take because the one would infer the body banks people are already dead, but the fact they just took someone that had a mild concussion is a fascinating idea. Like, do they then harvest all the organs if Theora hadn't gone and acquired Edison back? Do they just bury them how they do anyway? Do they pull a Monty Python when they collect your dead, just bop them over the head?
True, yeah, and, you're right, we'll talk about it here too, since it's a bigger thing. The receptionist for the body bank, whose name is Florence, for Nightingale's body bank because haha. Um, but I love her because she perfectly nails the "I'm just here to do my damn job" vibe, and so, like, "Do you want him alive or dead, honey? I don't care either way." It's just like she's not mean about it, she's not ghoulish about it, she's just like, I just got a checklist of things I gotta do, could tell me what you wanna do with it, I don't care." I love it, it's so banal that it makes this horrific concept even scarier, it's really, really, really enjoyable.
It's not only that though, she is a good employee.
Yeah,
Do you know why she's a good employee?
I'm curious what your opinion is.
Because she did her job when all right, first episode when Theora called, asked about Gorson, and like knew Gorson's name, yes. And then Theora asked some other question, and she said no. Her good employee bit is, but we've got these people, and
Yeah,
flip through in case Theora wanted to buy one. She's then made money for the company, which may get her like a raise or pat on the head later. A
she
good
did a good job of
employee.
upselling, good customer service, did a good job of upselling, she makes sure that, when belligerent customers try to ask for too much money for their deliveries, that she gives them only what the company requires of them, stays within company guidelines. Yeah, no, she's a perfect employee. I completely agree.
And it's not even subtle. It's just something that you'll generally overlook and not think about. But for me, having worked in customer service, that instantly struck me that she's going above and beyond her pay grade right now.
Yeah, yeah. The other thing I love about this opening is in the midst of this, people hunting another woman down and trying to get genetic stuff going on. Literally in the background of all of this is Edison Carr telling a story of, oh, by the way, they buried a shit ton of nuclear waste under this city.
Who
It's
cares?
just kind of a, oh, by the way, this horrible thing has happened, which it does become the B plot of the show later on, but it's way it just throws away this extremely horrible dystopian concept, shows you just how unsubtle this show is being.
And how little anyone cares.
Right, and that's what kind of the show is saying, is like, I could Edison Carr can literally tell you what's going on, and because it's presented as just a TV program, it's like, "Oh, that was interesting," and then you move on. The show is, in its bluntness, because it is television, critiquing how television can tell you information and also make you not care about it. It's actually really well pitched, but it's subtlety, admittedly, as a kid, I didn't get. But it's something I could see CBS kinda going, "Now, wait a minute." You know?
The downside of that is, then how does Edison have such high ratings? Then it makes no sense. Like, that is the undercurrent that doesn't quite land with me. If he's telling you these things, it's not making any impact, which would infer no one's really watching, even if they remotely care or not care. So that means why is he getting the ratings that allows him to run around to try to tell stories that Network 23 doesn't necessarily want him to tell, but they don't care enough because he makes enough money to offset any sort of negative impact he has.
I think the satire is that he is extremely popular to watch, and then people turn off the show and stop caring about what he's saying. The spectacle as entertainment is, I think, the satire they're trying to go for. Granted, there are other episodes that do that better. The episodes I picked, I try to get a relatively decent spread of things. So some of the episodes were more directly talking about how Edison platforms and how he's perceived. Like for example, there's an episode where Grossberg comes back, and so there's a whole thing about how that pans out. Um, but yes, so like because of the choice of episodes I made, that one doesn't show up necessarily in the episode. But over the show is that um, he can maybe have he makes small impacts and changes, but bigger stuff like this tends to just kind of, okay, so what, you know?
And is Edison a hypocrite? Because Edison, even in the first episode, I think we get the fact where Murray threatens to cut off his walking around money, and then we get a glimpse of where Edison lives in that big high class apartment and all the money that he's making to
That's
go and
Theore's
do those
apartment.
things.
That's Theodore's apartment.
Mm,
Yes.
I gotta say, I think that's
When
Edison's.
he woke up after get his head hit and recovered, that's Theodore's apartment he wakes up in.
Oh, no. I'm not talking about that one. I'll wait till we get
Oh,
there in a
okay.
paragraph.
Fair enough. All right. Well, let's move on then. Carter returns to rousing cheers at Control and a license from Chevy to continue pressing the story. Formby is working with Bryce to see if Max can be made tractable, but she reports back to Chevy that Max is being difficult because, of course, he is. Mel, the man who was attacked, tries to call Carter but is blocked by Theora and network policy. Having seen her, Mel then kidnaps Theora and forces her to take him to Carter. After Theora and Carter overpower him, they get to their story. Raina, the woman who's with him, is just the latest to have been stolen from the fringes. Kidnappings are always girls, and always go in the same two freaks in a van. Carter and Mel take to the fringes, where Chevy is concerned that Bryce is unable to control Max. Meanwhile, the body bank is preparing to crash freeze Raina, taking the risk of damage since all they want is her pituitary gland.
When Theora is kidnapped and brought to Edison's apartment, Edison has a very nice apartment that he's sitting up and lounging around in with a little video camera that goes down, and they go up to Edison's apartment. That
Is
is
that?
his apartment.
Oh, okay. I'm actually misread that. I thought that was the. I thought that was
It's not Theora's because
Plantagenet's. I
Theora's
thought it was
kidnapped,
Plantagenet's
and the
apartment.
kidnapper
I thought
says,
it was Plantagenet's.
"Take
I
me
thought it
to
was Plantagenet's
Edison's."
apartment.
It's like,
Okay.
"Take me
All
to
right. All right.
Edison's."
But still, you're right.
Edison,
Yes. Yes.
beautiful, expensive place.
But I mean, he's their star reporter, so I mean, yeah, he makes a lot of money. Maybe that's a
But
valid
that
thing.
goes back to my question then, is Edison a hypocrite? Because he's taking all that money and he's enjoying the life while I will go out and occasionally bring some truth to the people and sniff my coworkers.
So I will say, yes, I believe it is intentional that Edison Carter is on some level a contradiction. Um, uh, the next episode we're going to talk about has a moment where he straight up steps on a female employee to better his own career. I believe a lot of this is intentional. I one of the arcs that I think was intended for the show is that Max, in his naivety, helps Edison become a better person throughout the course of the show. I don't think that really lands the way it's intended, but I think it's meant to be the Edison makes Max more worldly, Max makes Edison a better person, along with Theora as well. Because as we all know, in the 80s, if you're a woman, your main role is to be the inspiration for your man to go out and do things and also to make him a better person, because otherwise he would be a relentless jackass. That is what women do in the 80s television. Sad but true.
Yeah, that's a bad movie trend. Um, to that point though, because I don't know if we call them out specifically here. If you go back and look at what was it, the broadcast news or like worldwide news that
Mhm.
is operating out of a van for the two of them, that is very punk. Like it is the most
Yes.
punk part of this cyberpunk show.
Worldwide television. Yes. Thank you, because I was. We'll talk about more about Blank Ridge in a minute, but basically, yes, worldwide television is a subplot that was cut from the original movie. Because that is Blank Reg and Dominique, his partner, and they're a pirate radio, pirate television station, who primarily just put out music videos because Blank Reg feels like no one likes his kind of music, so he intentionally hacks into other people's networks to show the kind of music that he thinks people should be watching. And then throughout the course of the TV show, starts to realize that he has the ability to broadcast things that Edison isn't able to broadcast. Unfortunately, that subplot gets kind of cut off at the knees because CBS is like, yeah, we don't like that. So they just become kind of comic relief throughout the second half of the TV show, sadly.
Because essentially, those are like your true truth tellers that you've even
Yes.
highlighted even more by saying that, which essentially makes them for a network gag PBS.
Two people in a van. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But there's
Educational
a
information and telling the truth. PBS.
uh, 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 we're moving to the next chapter, but I'll just briefly say like there's a joke where Reg is he cuts in and again, but you don't know this, but he's playing video videos because it's like this is big time television, you know, going around the clock around the world, and next more of the same because that's the gag is like they have the ability to break into these networks, and he just plays really shitty music videos, and that's all he wants to do. That's all he wants to do with his life. And the other thing I enjoy because it's F. Morgan Shepherd, I forget the actor's name. Um, but again, I knew it was
Mhm.
Blake Reg, loved him in the show, so I followed his career in like Star Trek and Babylon 5 ever since. I think he's a great actor. He's not, but I think he's a great actor. Um, he plays himself again, same character, um, but his voice is great. That's the main reason I love his voice. But anyway, no, Blank Reg. I love the fact that the show's also like what happens when the punk movement gets old. What do
Mhm.
they do? And so there's a lot of opportunity for critiquing punks specifically, not capital P punk, people who follow that specific subgenre and where they age out. Um, Again, it doesn't quite land because Blank Reg is given so little screen time and he's kind of turned into a jokey subplot. But if you take punk and apply it to boomers, there's actually a pretty interesting critique there
Hmm.
of what happens when people who started off as hippies and become extremely conservative, and Blank Reg being one of the few people who's holding to ideals and as a result is stuck to being in a van because he wants people to see his brand of music and that's all he really wants out of life because all the people of his generation moved on and sold out.
Yeah, that's a very, very sad story.
Yeah, it is. Again, so I have a soft spot for Blank Reg and big time television.
Well, I think I've acquired one over the course of getting to work on cyberpunk and then doing deep dives into like the different types of punk and everything else. Before I can tell you
Mhm.
about different types like goth. Now I can tell you the different types of various things.
Yep.
So it was fascinating. Even so much so that a recent Patton Oswalt thing that he put up that talked about he was at a punk bar when he was growing up, and the punk like bartender didn't talk to him. They ignored each other, and then this
Mhm.
dude showed up, and as soon as the dude sat down, the punk bartender said, "Get the fuck out." And then Patton turned around and said, "What do you mean? Why'd you tell him to get the fuck out?" I'm retelling Patton's Oswald's
Yeah.
like Blue Sky post now, and essentially he's like that guy had like a Nazi pin on, and they come up and they may be friendly at first, just him, and then you have like a drink or two, and then he'll bring a friend, and maybe that Nazi friend will be nice and everything else, and then they bring their friends, and all those guys are all assholes, and by that time you realize you got a punk bar, you have a Nazi bar, and
That's smart.
all your other people are gone and you can't kick them out because it's too much shit. So you have to close down. So instead,
Yep.
you got to cut them off at the start. And that is the pure punk for you because I could talk like about punk history, but I'm not going to do. Anyway,
Yeah.
I like Regis' character. He's like my favorite character in the whole show from 3 episodes that we watched.
Yeah, no, 100%. Um, I like a lot of this show, but I have a deep soft spot for and Dominique too. The other thing is also, again, you don't see much of it in this episode. In other episodes, there are episodes that feature Reg and Dominique more. Um, Dominique and Reg are a fantastic team. They're a married couple. Dominique handles the money. Reg handles the content. She understands him for who he is. She gives him shit because they love each other. But reality is that Reg respects Dominique. Dominique respects Reg, and they work great as a team. So it's like a nice married couple who are both very good in their respective things. Reg treats Dom exactly as an equal, doesn't talk down to her. She realizes he's kind of an idiot, but she loves him for that because he's a creative. And it's like it's a great relationship they have.
As a side note for anyone that wants to start your own business, and if you're primarily a creative, I can't recommend highly enough that you should go and try to find a partner who would do the business stuff so you can be the creative hat.
One
It is
thousand percent.
hard to do both to near impossible because it's a really weird balance. But if you can find a partner and both of you do it together from the jump, like you have a business half and a creative half, and you can make beautiful, beautiful things together. Because if you're
One
too
thousand percent.
creative, the whole business part falls apart. If you're too business focused, you don't have any creativity, so nothing really happens.
Yep. Uh, Anything else about this chunk? Although we could talk about Reg and Dominique all day, as far as I'm concerned.
No, because I turned into like a business discussion because I'm thinking about business stuff today. Maybe I'm
All right.
seeing evil corporate people and it's making me want to like start up a company to fight against the corpos.
Right. In the fringes, Carter has run into his streetwise friend Rick, who takes Carter to see Pancho, a blind fringer who apparently knows blank Reg, but Reg has gone home. A fringer girl, Paula, steals Carter's video cam and sells it to Reg, who trades her a book for it just before Carter shows up. Plantagenet pressures Form B to deliver the Max Headroom process just as Cheviot is working to get Max to cooperate with Zigzag. Max has decided to cooperate in his own fashion. He's on the air and running wild with his own viciously funny versions of zigzag product promotions. After Bryce explains that pulling the plug would kill the whole network, he finds a way to isolate Max until Carter can be located to talk some sense into him. Carter and Mel find Blank Reg at the mobile office of Big Time Television. Reg identifies the thug photos as Bruegel and Mailer and returns Carter video cam for a price. Reg, Mel, and Carter hunt the pair down in the sleazy fringe bar Caligula's, and after a brawl, it convinces them to deliver Carter to the same body bank disguised as a corpse. When Carter jumps out, Dr. Moon kills first Dr. Mason and then himself. So, we already talked about Reg and Big Time Television. Won't continue to go into that. Um, but one thing I liked about when you get into the fringes is how uh, Edison offers money at one point and is just straight up ignored. They work on barter and favor exchanges,
Yeah.
and I kind of dig that as a world building element.
It's interesting, but I've never been a big fan of barter-based economies.
Okay.
The the concept of it the concept of it bothers me enough because even in their fringe society that they're on, they're still reliant on power and other things that are coming from the government, the corporate body, which means they need some sort of actual currency to pay those people because the government's not bartering with you. You can't give me your camcorder and I'll give you like 2 weeks of power. So there's some sort of currency going on. And so the bartering concept undercuts part of the show here for me personally.
I actually have a pushback on that, and it's mainly because my family have started watching a show set in Alaska called Port. I forgot the name of it. Uh, anyway, it's basically a very small town in Alaska. There's like 12 people that live there, and they live on a subsistence lifestyle, and so it follows a bunch of families and people who live out there, and so a lot of them do like fishing and hunting and whatnot. And so amongst themselves, they do a lot of this. They do lots of barter and favor trades. Like I'll build your power generator for you if you will give me some of the smoked fish that you're getting out of your catch this month. But like you said, they have to get some of this stuff, some resources from what they call the lower 48, the United States government. So what they do is that they work together to scrounge or hunt or things that they can then sell to then use that money to buy the necessities they need. So there is a relationship between themselves and the government that does involve currency, but amongst themselves in that space, they work on barter and trade.
Yeah.
So that's how
And
I envision this is that inside the fringes, they do this, but then Reg would take things like that Vidicam, sell it for credits, and then use that to pay for things like power.
all right, I can see that, but I don't feel that they have that same sort of community here, but I like it. So
Fair. To be fair, a lot of it is to set up the gag of what is this, a book? Yeah, it's uncorruptible data storage. He's like, I want to use that and walk away because the kids these days they don't know what books anymore. Can't you see? And it's like it's a funny joke.
and this is also the chunk that makes me wish that Bryce wasn't here because having Bryce here undercuts other things that Theora could have done other than be kidnapped. Because Theora could have figured out the stuff that Bryce was doing,
Yes, yes.
and which would have made the relationship with Max, I think, stronger throughout the show, other than having Bryce occasionally pop up to do Max related stuff.
You're right. Another reason why Bryce bothers me is that if Bryce had gone out with Grossberg, which is I think what the intention was the original movie, um, then there's a very logical we can't control Max because the guy who helped create him isn't here anymore.
Yep.
And that would solve a lot of narrative problems. Instead, we have Bryce going, I don't know. We have stupid shit like he's tied into the computer network, but if we pull the plug, it would kill the whole network. I'm like, how bad is your computer network that you can't take chunks of it offline to service it? You're really bad at your job, Bryce, because the only way narrative makes it. Whereas, like, if it was Theora, she's like, listen, I can get you pieces of information, but I can't control Max because he is way outside of my league. I'm good at computers. I'm not good at whatever the hell this is. Then that will make much
Hmm.
more sense.
And it would have forced Edison to like do more interactions with Max, which maybe they didn't want to do because it was harder at the time. But that would have helped build those characters too, and it would have helped with show dynamics. Is what I'm looking at.
Right. Yes. Um, I will say one of the things about Max is that the conceit is that there are just is a barrage of jokes. It is just never ending. So sometimes it's easy to lose details in just his barrage of insanity. But one of my favorite very small jokes is when he's doing all of these zigzag ads, and he straight up talks about a zigzag automatic bacon straightener. And it's just like, and he pitches this thing like it's a very robot, like, yeah, why do you have curly bacon when you can have perfectly straight bacon? And it's just like, it has the conceit of like, this is the thing that maybe I do actually kind of want, but also is completely ridiculous. And it's again a really good satire of the kind of inane crap that Zigzag probably makes.
And this episode also, though, highlights that the new president is a corporate person because he threatens Edison and everything else, even with like this woman's life and everything on the line. He doesn't care about that. He cares about Zigzag and getting the money that they need. And that's why Max is forced to then do all these little commercial ads. So it
You know what?
reinforces that once again, he's a company person and he's doing company stuff. I sacrificed you with a minor hit to make this more profitable thing.
You know what? Now that you say that, I can see that better. Uh, uh, because you're right. Cheviot straight up says, "I don't care about. I know. I told you to follow this story about the nuclear waste and whatnot. You're instead following this other story that I didn't authorize for you. I want you to drop both of those and get Zigzag to shill for us, or sorry, get Max to shill for us for Zigzag." So that is
Yep.
fair. You're right. He is, but again, I think the way it's kind of written, it's still like, but we like him because he's Ben Cheviot, and another thing, another trend. It's not really a subplot; it's a trope that the show develops. Is that every other board member of the board is corrupt in their own way, except for apparently Ben Cheviot. That's the other reason what's kind of annoying is like he doesn't really have his I sold myself out for some reason to instead of what is the right thing. He doesn't have that subplot, but you will see two different board members do that through the course of our walkthrough. So,
Well, this could
but you're
also be
right.
one
You're
of the
right. Ben Cheviot is certainly focused on R23 exclusively.
it could be one of the concessions they made for their own higher ups to say that, where you're the president, you just care about the business and keeping it going. Everyone around you, though, like those
Right.
assholes are all corrupt. It's you, sir, that are the backbone of the company.
Right. 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 I also briefly want to mention the sheer hilarity of trying to do a sleazy strip club on a CBS time slot and budget. It's just like we all know what you're trying to do here, but no, just stop, CBS. Just don't.
You can't pull off Miami Vice.
No, no, you can't. Anything else about this junk?
Nah, I'm good with this.
All right, let's wrap it up. So we're getting close to time already. We have one episode to cover. Meanwhile, Formby, unable to get possession of the Max Headroom software, has dragged Bryce away to the condo where Plantagenet waits. Max turns himself off, hiding in a check processing software area because no one checks finances. Cheviot threatens Carter with termination unless he drops his self-assigned story and talks Mac into submission. While looking for Max, Theora accidentally frees him from his own trap in accounting. Carter answers Max's questions about fuzzy shared memories, mollifying him for the time being. Formby pressures Bryce to access the Max Headroom process to save Mother Plantagenet's mind, but Bryce is disturbed when they say they will kill Reyna to accomplish transfer. He manages to use elements within Max's files to send the message to Carter, who goes to the condo. As Max links into the condo terminal through Bryce's file and Theora sees the scene through the two-way sampler, Carter crashes into the condo. Mel attacks the doctor, saving Reyna, but we hear Mother's life support going flat in the background. Carter confronts Formby, goes live with the story, and brings down the corrupt body bank. And basically a bunch of stuff happens.
Yeah. It's like, oh, shit, we're almost out of time. Whoop,
Right.
done.
Right. And honestly, a lot of stuff here we kind of already covered a little bit in earlier stuff. I dislike the fact that the only reason Max is acting out is because he wants to know what drinking is. Like I don't conceptually mind the fact that Max is naive. The problem is his personality is he can't be seen as naive, so he has to make a joke about it like he knows what he's talking about. So Max can never be vulnerable, and I think that makes this whole thing a lot weaker as a result.
I can see that. Though I'm curious, there's difference in naivety and lack of knowledge. Like if he has all of Edison's memories and things, he should know what drinking is. He may not
Right.
understand why people want to go do it, but he knows what it
Right.
is.
Right. And I think that's why it bothers me. If he had said, why do we do this? Why would you intentionally obliterate memories? Memories are great. Why would you intentionally lose them? That would have been an interesting conversation. Instead, it's just,
Mhm.
what is drinking? It's like, you know what drinking is because you then make a joke about drinking afterwards. So it's like, what was the point of that, Max?
So that's the part that really stuck with me, but I let it go because I like the vibe of it, which one of the big things about cyberpunk is vibes,
Right.
not just
Yeah,
Cyndi Lauper.
this whole show is vibes, right? This whole show is just vibes. Um, and you're right. Like, I feel you in that ultimately for a show that is intrinsically about Matt Frewer talking to himself, there's surprisingly little of that. You know?
Yeah.
Because if they had emphasized that more, I feel like a lot of it, again, cut Bryce out, give Theora more to do, and basically make the show functionally Max Edison and Theora. And let that be the relationship triangle. Um, the show would be a lot stronger. And so you see glimpses of that, like, oh, this would have been really fantastic if they had done this. But instead, the need for the jokes kind of get in the way, the need to present Max a certain way kind of gets in the way. So you're right. Like it's like I loved what this scene was trying to do, but then when I actually watched it and analyzed it, it's like, but it's not actually doing the thing that I feel like it should be doing and I want it to do.
And even it all right, so you talk about the jokes. The jokes when not the joke they could have even had more jokes if they had removed Bryce. Once again, Bryce
Yep.
just seems to take up space and time. I can't find as a viewer now watching the show why there's a purpose for that character.
Yeah. In fact, all the stuff, like I said previously, all the explaining stuff Theora can do, and then when he's captured and then hacks it, Max could have done all of that.
Yeah, so I don't get it. Uh, I would my entire final opinion for this episode. I liked Reg enough that I want to watch more to see if Reg popped up some more.
He does. He does pop up. Um, I would encourage you to find more episodes with Reg in it because Reg is great. Okay, let's go to season two, the 80s. VUH church leader Vanna Smith, not Vanna White, even though my brain keeps wanting to do that, is making a hard pitch for 5 million credits in donations to keep their research into resurrection technology going. Number 23 board member Gene Ashwell is one of the contributors. Murray, on the other hand, smells a story. VUH has gotten too big too fast and on promises that have to be bogus. Theora fervently agrees, but Carter is weirdly reticent about it. His odd reaction gets Murray curious, and he quizzes Theora and then Max about Carter's religious beliefs. According to Max, Carter doesn't have any strong feelings on the subject, making his reaction even more inexplicable. Carter interviews a woman talking to a video simulacrum of her deceased husband who repeats the same phrase over and over. Carter is accosted by a View Age rep who escorts him to an office and answers some questions, then lets himself be arm twisted into calling Vanna Smith, who Carter assures the rep will want to see him. Smith appears from the side door and punches Carter in the face.
I'm curious why the estate of Philip K. Dick didn't sue this show. Because I'm trying to remember the name of the specific story, and it's a super famous one
Is it
about
we can remember
people that are
we
in
can remember it
half.
for your wholesale?
No, no, this one's the one about people that are in Half Life, which is simply a cold storage that puts their minds into like this big area together.
Oh, no,
And
you're right. We can remember for your wholesale is the one that they did a movie about Mars
yeah,
based off of.
essentially, this is the basic premise of that, but shaved off a lot of the sci-fi elements to it.
Right. No, so this is you're right. 87 literary cyberpunk is arguably wrapping up its first wave and heavily into its second wave. So if people writing the show are probably have read Philip K. Dick, Gibson, all the people who were heavy at that time period. So where's the line of inspiration and where's the line of straight out theft? Depends on how much money CBS has for lawyers.
Because literally, even the premise is that, like, so when they're in their Half Life state, they're in this big computer network and they can interact with each other, but you can also go and visit these people and they will talk to
Right.
you.
Right.
I guess minor spoiler for the thing is they slowly degrade over time, though.
Yes.
And there's an evil going on in there, too. But that's all I'm going to tell you. You should read the story. It's great. There's even a good audiobook of it if you want to listen to it.
Oh, cool. That's awesome. I mentioned before that there is a young female reporter that Edison just straight up steps on in this chunk.
Hmm.
Um, Turns out it is Rosalind Chow, before she got her part in Deep Space Nine, or sorry, Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, as Miles O'Brien's wife, Keiko.
Mm.
So there's my connection for you.
Good, because I didn't have that one.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, Edison straight up is like, going, well, God, do you want her to cover it? No, no offense. And she just rolls her eyes at him. So Edison's, we're second season now. Edison's still arrogant, which I like. And we're at a stage where he respects Theora more. One thing that's happened over the past few episodes that I dislike is that Murray increasingly looks like he's bad at his job. And it's not anything overt. It's just that he's, it's like, he has weird reactions. So he asks Theora, "Hey, what about Edison's beliefs?" And he's like, "I don't know." It's like, "Ask Max." And ask Max. Max is like, "I don't know." And so Murray's like, "Right, I need to pry deeply into my employees' personal affairs now. This is now vital that I understand what his private beliefs are." And it's like, Murray, calm down.
I'm honestly not surprised. That should have bothered me more, but having seen a lot of current business practices, I'm not super surprised.
Fair, fair, fair. We'll chalk it up to his aged well, sadly.
Yeah, yeah, very sad.
But we are also getting more into TV jokes. Again, this is part of my assertion that Max Headroom is really television. Like Theora makes the random comment that, "Oh God, he's been in the Dobie Gillis file again," which is a funny joke if you know what the hell Dobie Gillis is. But it's basically he's been in there's a file that is just a sitcom of Dobie Gillis, and Max has been in it and watching it. So it's like it's using computer language to basically recontextualize television again.
It is inferring that Max is also the thinker. That's a Dobie Gillis joke.
Nice, nice.
Is it? Are you surprised I know what Dobie Gillis is? And I can pull
No,
out
but I'm
joke.
not surprised you
Yeah.
know, but I'm sure a lot of people listening probably don't know what Dobie Gillis is. So,
If you want to see early Gilligan in action, go
yep,
watch Dobie
yep,
Gillis.
yep. He wrote a book about his experience of both Gilligan Island and Dobie Gillis. I forget the guy's name though.
I may have picked that up. And it's also for Dobie Gillis, it's interesting because I'm fairly certain the actress that they have marry the character later on in life during the series may have been LGBTQI pre-
Oh,
presented in how the show was run. I'm very fuzzy on that, but I think so, but I can't speak with
huh,
certainty. I need to
huh.
rewatch it.
Yeah, that's serious.
I could
Curious.
be totally wrong because it's been a long time. I haven't watched that since Nick at Night days.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I watched it. Anything else in this chunk?
I like the fact that they're taking a stab at religious cults. It was
Yes.
an interesting thing. I was surprised that they would do it.
Um, I'm jumping ahead slightly, but it is rumored this is the episode that got the show canceled.
I hence my surprise.
Right. It's like, I'm surprised they did this. It's like, yeah, so was CBS apparently.
Because if you got to think back to like the 80s, you've got to remember things like the 700 Club
100
that
Club.
were
Yep.
phenomenally successful and just like making money left and right. And they could send out moms to bring you down.
Yeah. Nowadays, making fun of televangelists, well, I was nowadays, in the past year or so, this has changed, but like a year or so ago, making fun of televangelists would be kind of like an easy target. But you're right. 87, this was an aggressive move.
Yeah. And now we see what happens when they did it to show you the
Right.
power of those organizations.
This is the fuck around stage of Max Headroom TV show.
Yeah. That's all I got for that.
Okay. So it turns out that Carter and Vanna had a 3-year-long love affair some time back when Carter was in college. Carter grills her about how she turned into a con artist, but Vanna claims both she and Carter ended up in the same place, which is the reassurance racket. Carter talks about Bryce about the so-called resurrection process, and Bryce assures him that the View Age Church could be storing only the most rudimentary form of a client's personality. Thanks, Bryce. Back in control, Murray confronts Carter and wants to know why Vanna White reacted so strongly. So yes, Vanna White, Vanna Smith. Carter brushes him off. Theora asks Max what Carter's feeling for Vanna are, and he confirms that amidst continuing fight, Carter's feelings were very strong. Carter begins recording his story, calling View Agent Vanna on the carpet for fraud. Theora is concerned that Carter has lost his objectivity and convinces him to let Vanna see the story before it airs to give her a second chance. Over another candlelit dinner in Edison's apartment, which you're right, is huge. I had forgotten this part. He tells her that he's breaking his rules, but wants to show her the tape. She says he's changed from a lover to a muckraker and decides to pass on seeing the tape, which suits Carter, and they end up in bed again instead. Carter wakes up alone, only to get an urgent call from Theora. Max has gone missing.
I'm going to tell you right now, Edison in relationships has the same level of heat as the prisoner did with almost every single actress he interacted with. That is the level of heat and
Yes.
intensity we're getting, not the final episode of the first season where there's actual heat, like throughout the rest of the course of the show. It is nice to meet you, ma'am. It is nice to meet you, sir. We are done. Thank you for that
We are
interaction.
now having the sex. Yes. No, yeah, zero chemistry. Honestly, I think the reason why Edison and Theora have chemistry is because it's Amanda Pays 100% doing all the work.
Yes, 100%. There's like no question about that at all.
Yes. It doesn't help that during the points where they're supposedly seducing each other again, they have those super tight close-ups on each other that reminds me of that Conan show where they were just constantly the cameras in everyone's face.
Now I want to go back and see if any of the people that were doing some cinematography on the Conan show worked on this show. It could
If
link back to
if
the
the
same
same
person.
director for this episode and that show, I would laugh my ass off if that was true.
It is all about the close up.
Right. Um, but again, like my point, like Edison's not a good person. He straight up violates his journalistic ethics for an old girlfriend.
Well, okay. Let's all right. I would normally not break this down because I'm not loving the Edison character. But this is because he's had a lot of talks with Theora over the entire course of the thing, and Theora sort of helps him just make that decision to go and do this because your old relationship, yada yada. Maybe she's changed, maybe you've changed. So that a lot of that is Theora also influencing something he already wanted to do.
Fair, but Theora's not a journalist. She's tech support, right? I love Theora, but that's her job. So she doesn't have to worry about the ethical repercussions as a reporter. Edison does.
But we've already established she's not a good person.
Right, right. So I mean, like it's
And
I
and do you remember what I called him at the top of the show? A hypocrite, hands
right,
down.
yeah, no. I see this as a benefit, right? Granted, if you're looking at 3 shows in episodes in isolation, I can see why you're not warming to Edison. I completely get that. To me, it's I see him as a flawed character. Um, and in some episodes, Max is actually his Jiminy Cricket. Max isn't doing that in this episode because he's been kidnapped, which is ridiculous. And actually, has another point. I'm going slightly into the next section, but basically, Max is kidnapped because something, something, something video storage, something, something, something. And it's like, it's very clear. The show's like, we don't know how to kidnap Max, so we'll just make some shit up.
Edison also, God, if I can remember all the people in the show, the only marginalized person in the show that shows up, Edison steps on her. Do you
Well,
remember any of the marginalized people throughout the 3 episodes we watched? Any of the
yes,
actual show?
the one of the Fringers, his alleged best friend that we've never heard of before and never see afterwards, is also black. But yes, he's
Okay,
also not painted great.
I take a step back. He stepped on 50% of the marginalized people that showed up in this series. How's that
Right,
sound? Is that better?
right, right, right. Not gonna argue that. Although it does lead to the great line of Murray saying, Edison gets punched 2 or 3 times a year, I think it's in his contract. So, even his boss is like, "Yeah, he gets punched a lot." So, it's like, "You kinda deserve it because 'cause you're kind of an asshole, Edison."
Ugh.
Anyway,
I'm gonna
uh,
say though, was my least favorite episode out of the 3 that we watched. And as someone that was rooting for them to take a dig at the church, I wanted to like this episode more than I do.
right. Let me wrap it up, and then we can talk about it as a whole. Um, so Theora figures out that the View Age Church has Max. Max is important to Edison, important enough to leverage him against the pending story. Using security camera recordings, Bryce tracks a shadowy figure taking Max's CPU into a car with no license plate. Someone else is lurking in the darkness, and Bryce zooms in and hands to show board member Gene Ashwell. Carter corners Ashwell in a network boardroom, and Ashwell admits to a momentary crisis, but insists that Max is network property, and what's good for ViewAge is good for Network 23. Max is holding court in rare fashion from a ViewAge viewing terminal as Vanna finds out how much he's really like Edison. In control, Theora confronts Carter, pointing out that his relationship with Vanna is clouding his judgment. He storms off to the ViewAge temple, where it's a three-way standoff between Carter, Max, and Vanna. Max is on a timer to be destroyed at 8 p.m. with just minutes to go, while Vanna is actually broadcasting simultaneously talking to Edison. They argue about fraud versus faith and how Carter doesn't have a lock on the truth. Then Max chimes in to preach at them from an inside perspective, and Vanna gives in. She has the timer stop just seconds before it runs out, and Carter's story runs on time. With Max back in Network's 23 computer, he admits to telling Theora that Carter was still in love with Vanna and to letting himself be kidnapped to save Carter from himself and from Vanna. And so, this is a bunch of nonsense, right? This is a load of nonsense. It leads to an interesting conversation between Max, Vanna, and Edison. How we get there is gibberish. How we end it is disappointing. That conversation was actually pretty interesting.
What part about it struck you the most?
The fact that Edison did not get out of that conversation ideologically unscathed. Vanna had some valid points that were never adequately refuted. Yes, she is a con artist that's absolutely abusing people's faith to make money. Her point that faith and truth are not incompatible was never deflected, because Edison's like, I present the truth as if it were the antithesis of faith. And she argues against that. And Edison's way to come back for that piece. And Max correctly points out that I've been watching this and I see that people need faith, but also, yeah, you're manipulating them. So Max, because of his outsider perspective, is able to actually pierce her arguments in a way that Edison can't, but doesn't invalidate a part of her argument, which is that there's a place for faith in the world.
Okay.
It's just how she's using it is a weapon, and it is unacceptable, which is what Max points out. So that conversation is interesting and shows, when Max has written well, what he's good at, which is to be a bit like the noir detective, the person outside the perspective who comes into a situation and passes judgment on it. Right?
Very nice.
When he's written well, that's what he's good at, but it's done so infrequently.
I like that. But so one of the parts I really liked about some more of my just overall thoughts. One of the parts I really liked about the episode, though, is how Vanna kept inferring that both religion and journalism are similar in what they're trying to do, and how both of them have pieces of the truth, but they also rely on whoever they're trying to tell something to become engaged with it and run with it. So that is an underlying current throughout that holds true to today. And it was never really fully addressed in the episode. And you made some good points towards the end, but like that is a part that at the start of the episode I wanted to get more of that I didn't get, which could also be why I'd lost some interest in the episode, because I really wanted that kernel of truth to go into it.
No, you're right. It's like they start with a really strong premise and then fuck around for 30 minutes and then start to address the actual interesting premise before they just kind of wrap it up. Like literally, they have 2 minutes to wrap it up before the whole thing explodes. It's like, let's have a moral debate while there's also literally a countdown clock. It's just like, oh, come on.
And this episode reinforces that there is no reason for the Bryce character.
Yeah. Right. I also, the other reason why this episode bugs me, and again, this is just a part that hasn't aged well, frankly, is Cheviot. In the process of this, Ashwell's trying to tell Cheviot, just shut Carter down. And Cheviot's like, it's hilarious you think I have control over Edison Carter. It's like, yes, you do. You're the president of the network. And just the idea that major multinational media corporations don't have control over individual reporters. It's just like, that's such a quaint, '80s concept, you know?
You mean you don't think that, Anderson Cooper is unstoppable and that he could do whatever he wanted to, corporations be damned?
I mean,
Rachel
on a
Maddow
personal
sits on
level,
the throne of MSNBC.
I mean, the eyes certainly do a lot of heavy lifting in that front. You can't tell those eyes no. Um,
Ah,
uh, uh,
I would say
but
Joy
yes,
Reid, but, they've done some evil stuff there too. I'm sorry,
yeah,
I know a lot of journalist stuff too that goes on in the world.
right. And the other reason, like, this episode bothers me is that it really puts the lie to the fact, like as I said before, Matt Frewer, I love him to death. He's not a good actor, because he is just all over the place. He is emotions, not even like there's no transition in his emotional states. One minute he's in love with Van, next minute he's threatening her. There's just not enough room for that relationship to breathe. And he's not helping that transition at all. She's trying to make it work that there's some more nuance here, but it doesn't help they have zero chemistry with each other. And it doesn't help that Vanna's response to everything is just kind of quietly whisper about it. So
But that's a sexy talk, Eddie. That's what you're missing
yeah,
is the subtlety of that move.
right.
Now, I will honestly say that I have no intention to ever go back and watch the series again. It did
Fair
not
enough.
inspire me. I'm glad that it like spoke to young 12-year-old Eddie and got him to be the punk that he is and to go off and do great stuff. I think for me, I came too late. I'm already semi-punkified and jaded to be able to go back and fully embrace the show for what it was doing. For parts of it that may have been ahead of its time when it was coming out, but at the same time, it feels like it was too timid to do what it really needed to do. Straddling the fence. It needed to make go one way or the other.
I completely agree. That's why I started said at the top of the show. This is where I proved that I have very bad taste in media. Yes, this absolutely inspired me. I still love this show extremely conditionally. Um, but to your point, yeah, it's a show that couldn't exist on CBS in a primetime slot in 1987. Simultaneously, that being the only time and way this show could possibly ever have existed. You know,
Mhm.
it was a zeitgeist moment. This show was canceled just as Max Headroom was wrapping up his 15 minutes of fame. Not even 20 minutes in the future. He didn't even last another 5 minutes. He was dead before it got there. Um, uh, it, it was clearly to capitalize on a craze that was dying out by the time the show started. Uh, the show clearly had aspirations above its intentions, and then CBS was clearly uninterested in what they wanted to do with the show because it was talking about people like them. So yeah, either it needed to slide more into being a dumb sci-fi adventure and just find a way path forward with that, or it needed to be even more biting in its satire. Um, because and also, I mean, like we're in an era of episodic television, you know. Um, we're not quite mature enough to have continuity, or sorry, to be serialized. It has continuity, like Zigzag in episode 3 references the events of episode 1, so there is continuity. But there's not. Edison has to be the same character at the beginning of each episode. Theo has to be the same character, and Max has to be the same episode at the beginning of each episode. And that's just how television was made then. If this show was made in a model of like a Babylon 5, 5 years after this, where they could have had character arcs with Edison and Theora and Max, if this were put on a network where they could have taken bigger swings at the things they were clearly chomping at the bit about, um, if they had just a tiny bit more budget to really suck, because I just saw it by season 2, it's literally just, "Here's a Hessian weave wall we're gonna show some purple light through, and that's our future cityscape." Yeah, I mean, they were clearly running low on budget.
And taking
Um,
into account though, each of these seasons is only what, 6, 7 episodes?
yeah, this show lasted 10 I mean, the show the last couple episodes were never aired. They're only now available on DVD. So I think it was the episode after this that actually finally got axed. But again, rumor is that this episode aired, they saw it, they didn't have time to axe it before the next episode aired, but they axed it after that. so it's not much time. It was frankly probably still finding its feet by the time it got killed. So who knows? If there's been a 26 episodes of Max Headroom, maybe it would have found its feet. Maybe it would have had stronger, smoother transitions. Um, but it wasn't meant to be. So I fully admit I'm watching this show partially through rose tinted lenses, partially because I love a bit of sci-fi cheese, partially because I have a deep love for really dodgy cyberpunk. Um, it's something that speaks to me, but even I was like you said, they're talking about rebooting it 5 years ago, and it's just like, I don't know, man. Um, now that we talked it through, I would actually be more keen on a reboot because I think with modern television, having a show about a reporter trying to get the truth in a post-truth world, living with a companion that has a completely outside perspective and only sees things through the lens of probably not the internet as opposed to television, um, and have actual character consequences for both of them as a result, could actually be a really interesting show.
I agree. I would actually rather see an updated version of it, and if they're using internet, they could even pull sort of a Blade Runner network Automan approach, and so that Max isn't just stuck in like a screen. Max would be like a holographic projection that could pop up at different places and have the same thing and
Yep.
be
Mhm.
almost interactive, but still not solid, which would then give Edison a reason to do what Edison's going to do because people could see Max running around, but Max would go through walls, people couldn't touch Max and can interact. So it
Certainly, and
has the
also
same vibe, but different.
right, and Max talking in short sound bites was at the time meant to be more of a nod towards, music video culture and editing, but now, basically, Max talking in memes would make a ton of sense, if you do it that way.
Yeah,
Um, and so yeah, I mean, if you reframe him as being part of the internet as opposed to part of television, I think you still do a lot of the same satire and do it reasonably well. And clearly, given some of the conversations we've had around this, some pieces of this still speak very strongly. Like, yes, talk about televised, televised religion, and the fact that there's a Murray made a no, sorry, uh, Carter makes a swipe about not paying taxes in there, which is just goes by and never gets addressed again, but that's something that you can dig into more. It's like, oh, it's tax free. Knock at Scientology as a result of that, you know? You could go into uh, the American healthcare system and how some people are actually literally worth more dead than alive, right? That this show's walking right up to, but never quite crosses the line of. The seeds are there, the bones are there. But
like,
I
I
don't
think
know.
it would work better today with the sheer amount of corruption and the coverage of that corruption that people have better insights into now, even if they don't pay attention to it than they did before.
Right. But in the back of my head, I keep thinking about the 2009 Prisoner, that AMC put together.
Never saw it. I know what it is, but I never saw it. Purposely didn't watch it.
Right. I saw one episode, and it was an attempt to adapt a beloved show. Well, not beloved. In this case, this show's not beloved, but to adapt an older show to modern sensibilities that just looked good on paper, but was terrible on screen. And I would be worried that Max Headroom would be kind of similar like that. So
Any final words before we close Max Headroom down 17 minutes into the future?
we talked longer than I expected about it. So I appreciate that. I appreciate your indulgence in watching this terrible show with me. Um, I do encourage people to, if you're interested in this, check out a couple episodes. It may speak to you, it may not. But at the end of the day, uh, we didn't talk much about the Blade Runner's connections, but I mean, I personally feel like you can see a line from Blade Runner to this. It's only 5 years apart between them. This is very much more Blade Runner as a music video rather than Blade Runner as serious science fiction. But the idea of, are digital people actually real? Do they have thoughts and feelings? The place of memory in relation to that, the need to find the truth in a world that doesn't want you to uncover the truth, the role of corporations, the look of the city. You can see a lot of connectivity from Blade Runner to Max Headroom.
I can see that. For me, I will stop by saying that I am glad I got a chance to see this show, though I won't go back and see it. So it's not a horrible show. It's not even a mass show. coming at it from a current perspective, which is what the issue becomes. So if you haven't seen it, I think it is great homework watching, and you should watch a couple episodes of it, and then you can form your own opinions.
Yep, agree.
Um, I guess we're getting close to wrapping up our cyberpunk slash Blade Runner run. I am thinking next week is potentially going to be the wrap up episode, unless I can pull a Hail Mary pass at Eddy unexpectedly and get him to do something else. I haven't mentioned to him yet that I'm not going to tell him what air, so you have to wait until we do next week.
Damn it.
Having said all that, if you want to come talk to me about cyberpunk or Blade Runner, you can do it on Blue Sky at Darker Hue or jump in Dark Hue Discord. What about you?
Same with me. If you want to talk to me about Max Headroom and why I love it, even though I shouldn't, you can find me on Blue Sky as pugsteady.com. That's also my website. Or you could come to Darker Hue Discord and we can talk about all sorts of stuff that's going on in the world that is not at all terrifying.
We'll be seeing you.